here we go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and squirrels. Whew. Wow. Such a good time. Such a good time. It's great being on with Cool Frog. Just make sure that you guys check him out. He's got a really good show during the day. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, we're back on day 10. Make sure that you go down there, that you hit that like and subscribe. You know where it's at. Make sure that you check out the link tree. Go over to Rumble. Subscribe over there. Doesn't take much. Let me see if I can get that thing up to some good subs. Build up that channel. Make it great. And have some fun with this. We are going to have so much fun with this. Just so you know. It's not hard. Like, subscribe. Thank you. Thank you. And that's all I should have to say at the very beginning of this. Why don't we just get down to this today? There we go. Look at that. Isn't that special? So, let's get this bad boy up and running. Hear what's going on. Cool.
It is January 25th, 2023.
Oh, I forgot to set the speed on this because we're not doing this in regular speed.
Good morning, Your Honor. The state of Wisconsin appears by Special Prosecutor Robert Jamboys, Deputy District Attorney Carly McNeil, and Public Service Special Prosecutor Beverly Jamboys.
Attorneys Bridget Krause, Jeremy Perry, and Mackenzie Renner appear on behalf of Mr. Mark Jensen, who appears in person. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning. I'm very happy everybody made it in today. It is slippery out there, and I appreciate the effort, even the attorneys and everybody else. It was not an easy drive this morning, but I think this morning is going to be the worst part of the day. But I will give you extra for lunch today if you need to travel too. So. Okay, lunch break. Just kidding.
That was pretty good. Pretty good. Way to break.
All right, we are then in the defendant's case. Ms. Krause, who's the next defense witness?
Mr. Paul DeFazio.
Mr. DeFazio. Now, he was also the defense witness, but now he's coming in as a prosecution's witness. See how this works out. This would be the brother. I think he wants to see that Mark goes to prison because he believes, I think, with every bit of his heart and soul that Mark did this. Hey, how's it going, Rabbit? Good to see you. Good to see you.
All right, Dr. DeFazio, you can remain standing. Raise your right hand. I'll swear
13
in.
bad
Swear the
day.
testimony in this man to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
Thank you. Try to get as close as you can to the microphone. And if you could spell your first and
I
last
got
name
you.
for the court reporter.
Paul, D-A-U-L,
Hear that.
DeFazio, capital D-E, capital F as in Frank, A, Z as in zebra, I-O.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Krause.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. DeFazio, what do you do for a living?
I am a psychotherapist.
And how long have you been a psychotherapist?
Approximately 51 years.
And where do you currently practice?
I have an office on Green Bay Road. It's 6125 Green Bay Road in Kenosha.
And what is the name of your office?
Psychiatric and Psychotherapy Clinic.
And have you been working, is this your own clinic?
Yes, in
And
partnership with my daughter, Lisa.
I think you said you're in a partnership with your daughter, Lisa.
Yes,
And you're a psychotherapist by trade.
yes.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your education. What kind of education do you need to have in order to become a psychotherapist?
I have an undergraduate degree, and that could be in almost anything. Mine happened to be in the biological sciences. And then I have a master's of social work. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker since the
Just think, these guys used to drive a needle right through your eye into your brain and scramble it. That's what psychotherapists used to do.
time I graduated, which was 53 years ago today, actually. Since that time, they've made changes, and they have the licensing is now licensed clinical social worker, LCSW.
So you have been you got your master's in social work in January of 1970?
1970.
1950.
And since getting your master's degree, have you been working and practicing in the field of psychotherapy?
Yes, most of the time. I started working at one of my field placements as a graduate student. I went back, they wanted me back, and I worked for the Racine schools at that time. And then an opportunity came with me to start a clinic with the one who started with me, Dr. Harold Kappas, who was general practice in Kenosha and then went back into psychiatry. And I had known him for many years, both in a family way, but also in others. And we kind of joked and said we'd start the clinic at one time when we were both still in school. And it was half joking, but maybe a little serious, but we did. We started the clinic, and that's how that started.
We talked a little bit about your profession being psychotherapy. What is psychotherapy?
Psychotherapy is, and I want to emphasize, I'm not an MD, so I can't order any medications. And that's why it's advantageous to have a psychiatrist that's in hand to be able to do that. But psychotherapist deals with mental, psychological, emotional problems, and one can pick their own subspecialty, but I did a lot of general psychotherapy. So that would be adults, that would be some children, and in family therapy and so forth.
You just said that that's why it's good to have, I think, in hand a psychiatrist. What did you mean by that?
sometimes with depression or anxiety, medication might be needed. And so at that point, then I refer to the psychiatrist for evaluation. And if the psychiatrist concurs, then the psychiatrist will order the medication and then review the patient's meds periodically. And then I would continue with the therapy.
Do you have to refer them outside your clinic for a psychiatrist?
No, at the present time, and that always changes because of what we've had now. Dr. Newman, Dr. Kappas retired 13 years afterwards, and then Dr. Lee Newman came into the practice, and she was with us, and then she died, I can't say exact, but a number of years ago. And then we have Dr. Ashok Shah, and he is a psychiatrist, and so he's in our clinic. And also Dr. Babu was a psychiatrist. She had a clinic of her own, but then when her partner retired, she asked if she could join us, and she joined us roughly about 7 years ago. I'm rounding it off, but somewhere around that time. So we have 2 psychiatrists in the office.
So as part of your
I don't know,
clinic,
they
it's
keep
important
losing
for you to have a psychiatrist
psychiatrists.
also in the clinic
Yes,
They
to
keep
work with
dying
you
off.
as you're providing therapy to your patients.
correct.
Have you seen patients over the last 53 years?
Yes.
And about how many patients do you think you've seen a year?
As I'm getting older, it was decreasing. At one time when I first started practice, I did inpatient as well. And Dr. Kappas was the MD that admitted the patient, and he would have the responsibility, but I would have do the therapy with individual patients. And at that time, Kenosha Memorial Hospital had 4 Palmer, and that was the psych ward. And then St. Catherine's also, it happened to be a 4th floor, but that was at the original St. Catherine's on the north side.
He was
And
making
at
the
that time, I
bucks.
saw many patients in the hospital, and then I would do the afternoon. I would go and see the patients in the office for could it be follow up or could be referrals on their own. In those days, this is kind of I've seen a lot of transition in terms of psychiatry and mental health. And mental health was at that time a second-class citizen to the healthcare field. And so as a result of that, things changed quite a bit during my practice years. And then, so in answer to your question, I saw many patients. I mean, I'm sure now into the thousands. It sounds, when I look back at it, it sounds kind of amazing, but the time did go by fast, and I did treat a lot of patients.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the information you get when you're treating patients.
Yes.
Can you tell us kind of what like intake of a new patient looks like?
Okay. Intake now, it looks differently than it did back in those days. The intake, one gets usually the secretary, the front office will get a little bit of a synopsis. Why are you coming? Why are you requesting help? And just get a real pinpoint of the referral. And then depending on that, in the clinic, it's referred to specific patients or specific therapists who at some time will say, I work better with adults, or I work better with the elderly, or I work better with kids, and so forth. So at that point, they're referred. Now, if they are referred to someone specific, and many times a general practitioner will refer, then they're referred right to the person they're referred to. So and then we do an intake, presenting problem, what's the situation,
Okay, enough.
really
Got it.
it is that we can't do.
Family history,
Come on.
prior treatment.
Yes,
And is that both prior treatment medically and prior treatment as relates to mental illness
yes,
or therapy?
our therapy.
Now, as a result of the work that you do you keep records of patients?
Yes, we do.
And the records that you keep, are they maintained as a regular course of your business?
Yes,
And do you maintain records for all of your patients?
yes, we do.
Are those records now electronic?
Yes, they're electronic, and it's done a lot differently. I would also say this, that now that something that happened about 3 years ago, there has been another little change and modification in that due to COVID, we do virtual appointments, and mine are virtual because I have to admit I've kept up on technology in terms of in progress in mental health areas, but in technology aspects of things, sometimes I have to ask my granddaughter, if I have trouble with the cell phone, how do I do this? And she'll say, and then she'll show me how to connect it with the computer. So I admit where I'm lacking in there. So in mine, when I'm doing virtual nowadays, I do it, but there's a definite form I fill out. The patient agrees to virtual contact and whatever it is. And since virtual will stay in the administration, everybody gets to hear this. All the people that work there, patients are first. Then I don't want to take.
Back in 1990 to 1991, did you have a patient by the name of Julie Jensen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your work with Ms. Jensen.
Okay.
First, Mr. DeFazio, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 100. Are these the records you kept on Julie Jensen during her treatment of her in 1990 to 1991?
Yes.
And are these the records that were kept as part of your business?
Yes.
Now, in 1990 to 1991, those records were handwritten.
Yes.
And it'd be fair to say that it's a little difficult to read them if you're not the person who wrote them.
Correct.
So I'm going to ask you to kind of look through that. The first page of Exhibit 100, that seems to be a list of medications. Few pages seem to be your notes as it relates to your conversations with Julie Jensen
Yes.
and your appointments. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then the last couple of pages seem to reflect the conversations you had with Mark Jensen.
Correct.
So when you talked a little bit about the information you get from patients, one of the things you said is that whether a spouse is going to be included in treatment.
Yes.
And why is that something you would talk about?
Many times we look at a situation in terms of a unit rather than an individual, because many times spouses can have a different view. They can be against coming in for therapy, or they're against the patient coming in for therapy, or they could actually contribute and be a helpful source. Many times they see things, we all see things in a different way. And so when I'm sitting here now, I see the exit doors and I see people different. I don't see the jury where someone else is sitting. They may see the jury sitting, and everybody's telling the truth, but it's from the view that you're seeing it. So sometimes we have the spouse can be very valuable in terms of helping us to what the issue is, whether it's the person seems to be having difficulty.
That's okay,
very
Puffer.
depressed, and we notice a change in behavior, or we see a person that, whatever it is diagnostically. That's number one. And then number two, with the permission of the patient, we try to get we encourage at times for the spouse to be involved, because of the fact that the spouse is against it. That can be very hard in terms of prognosis, a favorable prognosis, because it's undermining the provider and what we're trying to do. So it increases understanding for the spouse or a family. It also helps the provider be able to distinguish what some of the situations are in the home.
So that's a question that you ask your patients on the front end
Yes.
of whether the spouse is like supportive of the therapy.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you to go to the second page of Exhibit 100, and I believe that's the beginning of the treatment records for Julie Jensen.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the first date is that you saw Miss Jensen?
June 29th, 1990.
And I'm going to ask you about the notes, Mr. DeFazio, because your handwriting is a little difficult for me to read. So I'm going to ask you to kind of go through those with us. When you're meeting with a patient, do you take notes as you're talking to them?
I do. And I personally do. Some do not, but I do.
And is the first meeting where the most notes are?
Usually, by and large, yes, but not always.
And why would that be by and large where the most notes are?
Because we try to get some of the basic information down, as opposed to, and again, there's been a change from those days to now. We used to call it soap the notes, and that was where you would take an assessment, then you'd have and it would stand, and then have a plan, so forth, right away. Now there's actually guidelines that you check, whether it's on the computer or whether it's by itself. So in other words, you actually put the goals, and then the patient consent form consenting for treatment. So there's probably even more on that first one nowadays than there used to be years ago.
So in 1990, when I think you said the first visit was kind of an assessment and then a determination as to what the plan would be.
Yes.
And does the notes from that entry reflect that?
I myself, because it's been so many years ago, and I know I have to rely on the testimony that I did almost 15 years ago, as opposed to what I've done almost 30 years ago. But it did indicate the referral was from Dr. Paul Capelli. So I remember that he referred, because we would get referrals from him. And obviously he felt something was in need for Julie to come in. Then I got a brief, sometimes at that point too, and it's not really indicating what I said before, but what we do is we get comfortable feeling with the patient and let the patient feel comfortable with us. And so as a result of that, there are things that we do just to kind of, if the patient feels a little bit apprehensive, maybe we won't be as judicious with the notes in the sense of writing it down in detail and then wait for the next time. But I did get a brief. I can see from here, I got a brief summary, the one son, and married 6 years, and something a little bit about the husband and the place of employment and so forth. And then, then again, it is hard to distinguish some of the things I wrote at that time.
So at the top right-hand corner, it appears to have some basic information about Julie Jensen,
Yes.
like her date of birth.
I think it was 2/26, but at that point, and I can't remember, it's blocked with the year, but obviously I did know when she was, at the time, but I can't see what that says. I can't see it was 58 or 59 or something. I can't see that. But anyway, that's where, and then her address, the 9021 First Avenue.
And then the next entry is, I think you said, a referral by Paul Capelli.
Yes.
And he was a physician?
Yes, OBGYN, physician specialty.
And he referred Julie to your clinic?
Yes.
And then are you able to see what the next line says?
I'm trying to, first baby is son.
Excuse me, Your Honor, may I briefly approach I want to see what document he's actually.
Sure, go ahead. Or if you want to look at Ms. Krause's copy.
You're on page 2 of that document, correct? The very first entry as it relates to Julie Jensen?
I'm on the first, well, actually, I'm on page, with the progress note, June 29th, 1990, I'm still there.
June 29th, 1990.
The very first one.
Your Honor, I don't have this page. Could we have the bailiff make a copy?
You need a copy? We'll wait a moment and we'll get you a copy.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Krause.
So it looks like it says something about first baby son.
Yes.
And then does it say something around husband watch with an exclamation point?
Apparently, and it would probably be what would be in my testimony 15 years ago, whatever I interpreted, as I'm looking. It's possible here, but I can't say without a reasonable doubt. But that maybe the husband would watch.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about what the term watch means.
Sustained.
Mr. DeFazio, if I show you your prior testimony, would that refresh your memory?
That hopefully would.
What page are you looking at?
I'm going to ask you to look at lines 2 through 4 and let me know if that refreshes your memory.
Well, Your Honor, under the doctrine of completeness, I request that also that lines 5 through 10 be read at this point.
I haven't gotten to that question yet, but I'm sure I will. And if Mr. DeFazio doesn't remember, I'll refresh his memory with those lines.
Well, Your Honor, the thing is,
Why don't we just read all the lines right now and then we're done?
Then I'm going to read all the transcript because my concern is that Mr. DeFazio might not remember everything after 23 years. So that's why I refreshed his memory.
Okay.
except that, Your Honor, immediately after that, he's indicating, I'm not exactly sure what watch means. So that's why I'm wanting it under the doctrine of completeness. And under the doctrine of completeness, you bring that point up right now to put that in context.
How many lines do we have to read right now?
That was going to be my next question. And if he did not remember it, then I would have refreshed his memory with that testimony.
Well,
Because
if
that's
we
what I have to do in order to get the testimony out, Judge.
refresh his memory as to what you want to do and then read the other lines right after that.
Mr. DeFazio, did that refresh your memory as to what that note said?
That one does, and because as I was looking at it, it meant back to work that Julie would be going back to work, and the husband, that is Mark, would be the one taking care of being with the baby.
And did it say when Julie was going back to work?
Now that BW back to work is 5/1/90, so May 1st, 1990.
And back in 2008, you were asked, do you know what your notation about husband watch refers to after the notation about the first baby? And do you remember responding, I'm not exactly sure watch. I'm not exactly sure what that meant at that time. I could only suppose what it might mean.
And that is the same right now.
Anything else?
I think the next 3 lines through 11 through 13.
Okay, do you have any reasonable understanding of what this is? Or is it just merely a guess at this point? And your response, it's merely a guess.
Correct.
And that's consistent with what you just said.
Yes.
Underneath that line, can you tell what it says?
Are married 6 years.
And then under that?
First child.
And then there's a note next to that. Can you read what that says?
I think it said limited postpartum depression, at least from what I see there.
And the limited postpartum depression, do you remember if that's something Julie said or just a note you made?
I cannot recall that.
If I show you your testimony from 2008, would that help?
Hopefully.
So which page?
I'm going to show page 92.
Prosecution could do this on cross.
6 through 11. And let me know if it refreshes.
It does.
So, Mr. DeFazio, was that something she said to you or a note that you made?
I looked at it and assessed what she said, and to the best of my ability was the fact that she had some depression there. I cannot say with absolute certainty that she used that term, but then I interpreted the symptoms that she stated with what would seem to match. The baby was born within that realm of area, within that area of time that would be understandable, and this is not an unusual circumstance for mothers to experience after birth of a child.
So, based upon your conversation with her, it's something you were thinking about?
Yes.
And you made a note of that?
Yes.
Did you see some signs of postpartum depression?
Basically, I believe, if the best of my recollection there is how she presented whatever she told me, and I can't recall specifically all those years ago what she actually told me, but there must have been something that would indicate that I would write that down. Otherwise, it's something we look for in terms of any mother that would come in recently having a baby, but it doesn't really shine a light unless there's some other things that provide some substance to that would contribute to that type of assumption there. So.
About halfway to 3/4 of the way down the page, it says something, mom, alcoholic, AA. Do you remember having that conversation with Ms. Jensen?
Yes.
And why would you have had that conversation with Ms. Jensen?
Usually what happens is we try to get a history of the family, the biological parents. Sometimes we can't if it's an adoptive parent, or sometimes they don't know much of the history. Even in those days, not a lot was done in terms of realizing the value of a family history. So they're not like today's world where it's very accurate and can really help out. So I did ask, and she did indicate that her mother had problems with depression, and was depressed, and also alcohol problems.
The mother's history of depression and alcohol problems, is that something that you talked to Ms. Jensen about, if you remember, through the course of her therapy?
I'm sure I can't remember exactly the situation, but to the best of my recollection, I'm sure I discussed that with her, because that was quite important at the time for me to evaluate and treat Julie in the appropriate way. 2 ways: one, by how she grew up and what circumstances, and then obviously because she herself now was experiencing some obvious issues, mental issues that were of concern.
And what you testified earlier is like personal history, family history, something you want to know.
Yes.
Underneath that note, can you tell what the next note is? I know it's stamped, but just wondering if you can see that next note.
I think the one right above the stamp says mother alcoholic AA.
Right, the one right below that. Can you tell if it says counseling in College Parkside?
It might, I don't know if it says counseling, but it does say College Parkside.
If I showed you a copy of your testimony from 2008, would that help refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Page 94. And ask you to look at lines 6 through 8, and let me know if it refreshes your recollection.
So she did have the counseling in College at Parkside.
I know it's hard to kind of remember everything that you wrote from 1990 to 1991, so I'm not going to go through every note with you. I'm going to try to pick out some of the specific notes that you made. At the bottom of that page, can you tell us what the note with like the little half asterisk says?
I'm reasonably sure where it says she feels like she is the one to do all the extra work.
And is that a complaint that she had as it related to her child and her marriage?
Since she's the only one there, and at that particular time, I hadn't really knowingly talked to anybody else about it. I would assume she must have expressed some concern that possibly, and it's understandable if after having a child, your life changes, especially a baby that would require a lot of care and there's a lot more work. So I think I'm reasonably sure that she expressed that, and I put a little cross or asterisk by it, indicating this is kind of a flag that I need to look at in the future.
As a therapist, is it uncommon to see working moms who feel like they are the ones that are taking on the extra work?
Yes, because they are trying to dual role. They get home, and of course, sometimes that can be next to impossible to try to, you can't do what you did before. It's not like getting home, taking a shower and going to bed or just relaxing. It's okay, now you've got a baby either. And even if there's a relative or someone taking care of the baby outside the home, still have the responsibilities because babies don't automatically stop crying because their parents need to sleep.
So it's a common complaint
Yes.
of new working moms.
Correct.
Or old working moms.
Old working moms too.
I'm going to ask you to go to the third page of Exhibit 100. And can you read anything on that page about Ms. Jensen's comments to you about her family?
Which date? I'm gonna make
The
sure.
second page, it's the continuation of June 29th of 1990.
Okay. So it says on the top, the first thing, mother, and then father, AMC. Let me make sure I got the right.
That's the right page.
Hello,
That's right.
mother.
And are you able to read the note below that?
Hello, father. Here I am at Camp Granada.
I believe within certain age, women who stay home become brain dead. I think
And
that's
that might have just been a note that you took based upon something Ms. Jensen told you.
correct.
And if you go about a fourth of the way down, something starts with husband. It appears HUSB. Can you read what that says?
Husband knows and is glad that is home for the baby. I'm not, is coming for help. Excuse me. Now I know. Husband knows and is glad that the patient is coming for help.
And is that based upon what you talked about earlier, asking her about what her husband knew as it related to her therapy?
I can't really say with certainty.
But the note that you took is husband knows and is glad coming for help.
Correct.
And can you read the line under that?
May be willing to come in.
And is that in reference to the previous note?
Yes.
And so it sounds like the husband would be willing to come in.
Objection, counsel's leading the witness.
Could you just rephrase the question, Ms. Krause?
Does the note say then the husband may be willing to come in?
That is correct.
Oh, Jesus.
And that's information that you got from Ms.
prosecution.
Jensen.
Yes.
Now, after that, it appears that kind of what you told us before is that you would set up a plan for the patient.
Correct.
And is there a plan stated there?
Plan to see her in 3 weeks, and then also see husband, get an appointment for the husband to come in.
So at that point, your plan was to see Ms. Jensen 3 more times and then see her husband.
Well, at least to see her possibly in 3 weeks, or 3 more, see 3 times. Correct. Yeah, that's right, because the excess times. So see 3 times and then see the husband. So I would get a little feel out of a little more basis with Julie, and then be able to have the husband come in.
Do you remember what your diagnosis was of Ms. Jensen after that meeting?
Yes.
And what was that?
Adult situational reaction with mixed features.
And what does that mean?
Okay. We usually, especially in those days, but even now, we don't want to take a diagnosis on somebody that is worse than or more severe than what they have. And so this means she's an adult reacting to a situation and having features of depression and anxiety. And we all face, every one of us at some point in time will have this diagnosis if looked at. Something changes, whether it's a job or whether it's moving someplace, or it could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. But we're reacting with some depression with it, and we're reacting with some anxiety. So what it does is it doesn't relate to the next major one, which is possibly major depression or even regular depression. Regular depression is like getting cut and bleeding. So that if you lose somebody, let's say you lost a loved one, one's going to be depressed, and that's not mental illness. That's human being depressed because they lost somebody. And physically, it's the same as getting cut. And again, it's not that a bleeder, it's a bleeder. If you get cut, you're going to bleed. So at that point, we would use the least amount. We have to come up with a diagnosis. So we used the least amount severe adult situational reaction with mixed features, presenting the fact that I didn't want to go so far as to say the baby, there's postpartum depression there for sure. This was at the beginning of this situation. And I didn't want to also get into if there's a chemical imbalance or some other type of situation.
One of the things you had told us earlier in your testimony was that people with mental illness were kind of treated like second-class citizens.
Yes.
And was that a concern you had after initial meetings with patients back in the 90s?
There was a lot of times that would happen, and it was a concern. And that's why I alerted patients who were seeing us at the clinic that if they were applying for a job and they were in the list to ask, definitely put down the truth. If you're on an antidepressant, put it down. Don't hide it, because if they do a drug screening and they find that you're lying, you'll probably get terminated. But if you just, nothing hurts the truth. And if they need something, I would write something saying there would be nothing contraindicated from a job. And that did happen. It'd be interesting to see the different people. One person was apprehensive of doing it, put down that they were on an antidepressant, and their immediate boss who hired them said, "Oh, are you on that? I wonder how that works. I'm on this." And you could just see through the years how more acceptance of the mental illness as an appropriate illness took over. But that's why that situation was that way.
In the early 90s, was there a stigma involved with being diagnosed as depressed?
It was getting better, but it was still there for a lot of people, depending on And as I think I indicated in my last testimony, we had people running for office that had diagnosis of depression, and of course that became a real issue. And whereas I think nowadays that part of it, as long as it doesn't affect performing in the particular office, I don't think it affects as much. So there's definitely a lessening. There might be still a little, but I don't think there's anywhere near what used to be when I started. And certainly through the years it has improved.
So one of the things that you had talked
Now
to
we
Jensen
just
about
suck
being
it up and
classified
drink
was that your mother was
alcohol,
an alcoholic and
soak
somehow
away
ate.
that
I'm going
depression.
to show you what's in Marcus Exhibit 101.
What was that?
Hey, Daisy girl, good to see you. Good to see you. Oh, everybody, say hello.
Mr. DeFazio, do you recognize Exhibit 101?
Yes.
And what is that?
And I, to the best of my recollection, I can't remember if I gave.
Everybody needs to say hello to the Frogg Raid. Say hello to the Frogg Raid. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. Welcome and welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here. As we just zip on through all of this, put a smile on your face and enjoy Mr. DeFazio. Mr. DeFazio.
This to the patient, or the patient had already presented this to me, because I don't believe that I have seen this in a lot of our records, but it indicates the adult children of alcoholics and the result of how they feel and react based upon the experience they've had with a parent who has problem with alcoholism or depression. And when I say depression, untreated depression, obviously, not depression that's under control with treatment.
And when you look at the second and third page of that document, that's the patient information for Julie Jensen for your clinic.
Yes.
And at the bottom of the third page and the bottom of the fourth page, it actually has Miss Jensen's signature.
Yes.
Now, did you fill this out for Julie Jensen, or did she fill it out?
She filled it out.
And can you read what the first question asks?
Any recent deaths in the family?
I'm sorry, on the first page.
Yeah, you mean as it relates to the dates?
As in the adult children of alcoholics page, the very first page.
Okay.
It asks the question number 1.
Do I often feel isolated and afraid of people, especially authority figures? And she answered, or the answer was yes on here.
And can you tell us what number 2 said?
Have I observed myself to be an approval seeker, losing my own identity in the process? Yes.
And the answer was yes.
Yes.
And what about number 3?
Do I feel overly frightened?
Mr. DeFazio, can you speak into the microphone? Sorry, I know it's hard when you're reading.
Do I feel overly frightened of angry people and personal criticism? Yes.
And number 4?
Do I often feel I'm a victim in personal and career relationships? Yes.
And number 5?
Do I sometimes feel I have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, which makes it easier to be concerned with others rather than myself? Yes.
And number 6?
Do I find it hard to look at my own faults and my own responsibilities to myself? Yes.
And number 7?
Do I get guilt feelings when I stand up for myself instead of giving it in to others? Yes.
And number 8?
Do I feel addicted to excitement? And there's the answer maybe, question mark, exclamation point, or just emotional turmoil.
And number 9?
Do I confuse love with pity and tend to love people I can pity and rescue? Maybe, question mark.
And number 10?
Do I find it hard to feel or express feelings, including feelings such as joy or happiness? Yes.
And number 11?
Do I find I judge myself harshly? Yes.
And number 12?
Do I have a low sense of self-esteem? Yes.
And number 13?
Do I often feel abandoned in the counsel of my relationships?
Say in the course of my relationships?
Excuse me, in the course of my relationships, yes.
And number 14?
Do I tend to be a reactor instead of an actor? Yes.
And that's the document and the answers filled out by Miss Jensen.
To the best of my knowledge that I can remember, because I didn't fill it out, so I don't.
It's not your handwriting.
It's not my handwriting. It's readable.
Right. You can read the answers. Mr. DeFazio, I'm going to take you then to the next entry of July 6th of 1990. Can you read that first note, July 6, 1990?
Little support from spouse.
And then the note after that?
Childhood. Older brother.
You have
Child
to read back into the
abuse.
microphone, sir.
Older brother, child abuse. Brother died when he was, I can't see if that was 50, there because that print is in there, right?
If I showed you a copy of your testimony from last time, would that refresh your memory?
Yes.
Good to see you there, cool frog.
Review lines 5 through 7, and let me know if that refreshes your memory.
Good stuff, good stuff.
Yes.
Can you tell us if that was 5 or 50?
It was 5.
So it's, I think you testified brother died when he was 5.
Correct.
Can you tell what the note is under that?
It says, now I don't know what this, the one that says Gene, but I can't remember what that was, but underneath children, and it says bad, see in 1 week.
Does that say childhood or children?
Or that might be child. It could be possibly childhood. If whatever it would say in that in my testimony, there would definitely be the right answer.
On what page? Same page?
Document, ask you to read 13 through 15 and let me know if that refreshes your memory.
That is correct.
And what did that say?
She had a very unhappy childhood, she felt, and as she recalls it, it was quite it was not a happy childhood whatsoever.
And under that note, is that just see 1 week?
Yes,
The next time it looks like you saw Miss Jensen was July 17th. Is that what that says?
correct.
And are there any notes from that day?
It says see in 2 weeks, but I don't see any here, so I'm not sure exactly. Usually, if a person doesn't show or I have to reschedule, I put that down. So there was neither one, so I'm not sure why that is blank.
There's just no notes.
There's no notes. Yeah.
And the next note is from September 14th of 1990.
Yes.
Can you tell what that says?
Depression seasonal. See husband.
September 4th. Thank you. That's September 4th, right?
September
Mr.
4th.
Fazio?
Yes.
And what does that say?
Depression seasonal. See husband next week. See and then see in 2 weeks, meaning see her in 2 weeks.
I'm going to ask you to go to the next page of the document. I think it's September 20th of 1990.
Yes.
Can you tell me what that note is?
Discussed antidepressant. See in 2 weeks.
Do you know why it says discuss antidepressant?
I felt at that time that I had seen her long enough to realize that I think she could use medication. And my philosophy is, don't rush the meds right away. Get a feel of the patient, understand possibly what's happening, and then refer for consultation for medication. And I felt that at that point, I wanted to discuss with the patient and get her okay to say, it's my feeling that you get evaluated by our psychiatrist for meds.
So at that point, as you testified earlier, you don't prescribe medication.
Correct.
So was it your intent to refer her to your psychiatrist?
Yes.
And do you know if that happened?
Yes, it did.
Can you tell what the October 8th, I think that is 1990, is the next note?
October 18th.
18th? Okay. October 8th. It's in that kind of blocked text.
I believe it said mental illness, mother,
And then next to that to the right,
alcoholism, mother, and maternal father.
why would that be information that you need?
Because many times these things can be genetic. They can be learned or they can be genetic. And so therefore, we don't go into, as long as we know it's existing, but it's important to know the cause of it. But at that point, then the treatment is going to be the same, essentially, for the medication, whether it's genetic or if it's environmental, learned or whatever. So, but it's good to get the knowledge of where this is coming from. And you can see, obviously, the alcoholism and the mother and also the maternal father.
Underneath that, can you tell us what it says?
It looks like in the writing there, it says something with suicide, brother attempted suicide, age 17.
And then underneath that,
Possible dual diagnosis, but never had been treated as such.
and you know if that's referring to Julie or someone else?
I really can't see. I don't know if my notes would, my testimony last time, I can't really see.
You just know that's a note that you put down there.
Correct.
And with individuals that are sometimes facing depression and alcoholism, is it a concern that there needs to be a dual diagnosis of that patient?
Yes.
And what's the reason for that?
We don't know sometimes which came first. Was the patient self-treating with the alcohol? Because obviously short-term, many times it does camouflage or cover up some of the depression, or it definitely deals with some of the anxiety caused. And of course, obviously, if one's treating with alcohol, that's a temporary solution to a problem that's going to get a lot larger. On the other hand, so it's hard to know, since she did have history with the alcoholic mother who was depressed, there was an indication it could be two things going on, but it was too early to determine, other than the fact that actually she did admit to being depressed and having some.
I don't
some
have a
problem with-
drinking
perceived problem with
problem.
drinking.
And then the next
I
one,
don't have a
can you
drinking
tell us what that says?
Possible.
I think it says patient denies.
Okay, patient denies suicidal thoughts at this time. I could not do it because of my baby, 8 months, in parentheses, baby being 8 months old.
Oh,
And based upon the baby being 8 months, that's a note that refers to Julie Jensen.
Julie Jensen's baby being eight months old, and she was asking suicide. No, I wouldn't do that because I have this baby and I'm not going to take my life.
Are patients always honest with you about being suicidal?
It depends on the situation.
No.
Many times, if it's an adolescent patient, the patient can be honest, but adolescents are impulsive. But in everything else, there might be a patient, an adolescent patient of mine who's a good student and no problem in school, and all of a sudden on the first spring day, someone says to him, "Hey, let's go out and we'll do this and cut class unauthorized." Well, that good student, impulsive, just do it at the last minute. As we get older, we tend to realize that sometimes impulsive decisions don't help, and we have to think it out. So the same goes if they're depressed. If a patient is depressed and they think life is not worth living, this is no good, and you don't think of we're going to get beyond this or we're going to do this, it'll get better. So they may do something. Also, the other thing that may concern something is if they're drinking heavily.
it always gets better.
Your Honor, objection. Your Honor, this is an irrelevant hypothetical. It's got nothing to do with this case. There's no indication Julie was drinking heavily. This is simply irrelevant speculation on the part of this witness about things that have nothing to do with this case.
Sounds like a great cross-examination question.
There you go.
Only witness, so continue.
There you go.
So anyway, I did not feel at that point, if the question is, I didn't feel that there was any problem, but she needed some antidepressant.
In your experience, have you had patients who deny being suicidal and have committed suicide?
Yes.
And have you ever treated a mother with small children who committed suicide?
To the best of my recollection, no, but I can't say absolutely.
Are you sure? What about Julie?
So I'm going to go back to the notes. I think we're on October 18th. That's that bottom of that page.
That was a horrible question by
Read
defense.
What that says.
Conference with husband, willing to be involved. And I explain situation to him. See in 3 weeks.
Okay. And if we go to the next page, October 23rd, 1990.
discuss situation with patient who wants to try meds, antidepressant, parentheses, open and closed. Husband to be involved in therapy. Ask Dr. Newman to order meds. See in 1 week.
If you go to the first page of that document I gave you, Exhibit 100, I believe it is, there's a list of medications prescribed to Julie Jensen.
Yes.
And who prescribed those medications to Julie Jensen?
Dr. Lee Newman.
And Dr. Newman was the psychiatrist on staff at the clinic.
Yes.
Does it say when the first Prozac was provided to Julie Jensen?
It says, according to the notes here, October 23rd, 1990, Prozac 20 milligrams, 1 after breakfast.
And does it say whether that prescription was sent in or she was given samples?
Samples, she was given 14 per Dr. Newman.
Now, as we look at the treatment or the medication records for Ms. Jensen, when was the last time Prozac was given to Ms. Jensen?
According to here, January 30th, 1991.
Is it possible that's April 30th based on the fact the one above it is April 16th?
Oh, yes. Excuse me. I think part of it didn't come through here. So it would be April 30th, 1991.
Now, when you look at the different entries as it relates to the Prozac being provided to Ms. Jensen between October 23rd of 1990 and April 30th of 1991, was a prescription sent to Walgreens or was she given samples?
It looks from the best of what I can see here, she was getting samples. I can't recall. I can't recall if she had gone to Walgreens or not at that time.
And Mr. DeFazio, if you look at the page after the one October 23rd, 1990, is there a treatment note from Dr. Newman?
There's nothing untoward giving samples. A lot of times doctors will do that so they don't have to write you a full prescription. They would
Unless the
give you the
pages are sticking.
samples.
Well, here it is. I got it.
Papers are sticking
And is that a patient note from Dr. Newman?
Yes.
It'd be fair to say her
to
handwriting
see
was
how
easier to
your
read.
body
Yes,
reacts
very much
to
so.
it.
And her treatment records were kept in the same records that.
And I'm not a
Dr.
doctor,
Jensen.
so this is
Correct.
not medical advice.
When you look at the third sentence, cried all the time. Can you tell us what that
Objection.
says?
Objection. This is hearsay.
Sustained.
It's a business record exception, Judge.
No, it's hearsay, Your Honor.
We'll take
No.
the vote.
No, it's not. It's an objection to the rule because the lady's dead. It's no different than prosecution being able to do it. And he warned them, he warned prosecution, you know, you're going down this road. I'm going to do the same thing for them that I'm doing for you. But they're not paying any attention. Prosecution is going to fight this
Right,
tooth and
jury is
nail.
outside the courtroom. Go ahead, Mr. Janboys.
Your Honor, when I start cross-examining Mr. DeFazio, I could cross-examine him on this note because it's hearsay that he may or may not rely upon. But when the proponent of
Yeah.
expert testimony is eliciting testimony from that expert, the proponent is not allowed to reveal hearsay in the course of the direct examination of their expert. This is a hearsay document. The note that this doctor made is not the note that Mr. DeFazio made. So it's classic hearsay, and it's inadmissible during the course of the direct examination of this witness. And it's not a business record exception. I mean, a business record is something, a routinely recorded thing like opening up the office, closing up the office. This is a note of a professional concerning a conversation that professional had with Julie Jensen. So it's actually triple hearsay.
He's not an expert. He's a lay witness. So I actually,
He's not an expert.
we did not file an, he's a lay witness. He's a fact witness. He's the individual who treated Julie Jensen and worked with a psychiatrist in his office in order to provide that treatment. I'm not saying that he couldn't be an expert. I'm just saying that the defense called him as a fact witness. So the whole conversation about the information we can get out on direct is different as it
Mhm.
relates to Mr. DeFazio. Second, it is a record kept in regularly conducted business. I laid the foundation for that when I first started talking about this. This is information that came out in the first trial. Per Jensen 2, statements made by Julie Jensen as to her state of mind are not hearsay, are not testimonial. They can come
Oh,
in.
he's pissed.
And this is
Look
a
at him.
document
He's
that he
turned
has
red.
in his
He wants to interrupt.
patient,
Your Honor, Your
file
Honor,
for
Your Honor.
diagnosis and treatment of Julie Jensen, which is also a hearsay exception.
So, Your Honor, just to clarify this issue about hearsay statements, it is the defendant who forfeited his right to challenge a hearsay statement from Julie Jensen on hearsay grounds. The state has not forfeited its right to challenge hearsay statements that Julie Jensen made. It is the defendant that forfeited that right. So this still must pass muster under hearsay. And this is a hearsay statement. Now, counsel's discussion about business records, let's take that analysis and apply it to police reports. So according to her analysis, because a police report is a record kept by a police department, then any hearsay statement contained in there is something that a police officer can testify to. That's not the law. And that's not the law with respect to business records. And it's not the law with respect to this. This statement that I think it was Dr. Newman had prepared concerning her conversation with Julie Jensen is a hearsay document, and it's not admissible.
Judge, as to police reports, they're kept in the course of business, but they're for the purpose of litigation, which means that's what makes them not a business record exception. As it relates to a medical file, and the notes are kept as a part of regularly recorded business, it is a business record exception. And we also have the fact that this information is being provided for the purpose of medical treatment and diagnosis.
We're just going to stop for a second. Can I see the?
Damn.
Mr. DeFazio?
Damn. Okay. Hearsay
Dr.
objection.
Newman?
It is.
And I
So it's Dr.
don't
Newman.
want to say shocked, but when you said he's a lay witness, he's been saying some pretty technical opinions about depression, alcoholism, talking about history if it's in the family.
Doesn't matter
what
anything.
therapists do. He's
They
got a
never said
master's
he
degree.
was. Never
I'm
said
not
he
buying
was.
that argument.
I was just using the court's own language from the prior objection when the court said that this is a lay witness, so he can testify
I
as
said he's a lay witness.
as it related to the objection. that we had at the beginning of his testimony. I understand that he very well could lay a foundation to give expert testimony about depression, but as it relates to this case, Judge, he's a fact witness. He treated Julie Jensen, and he worked with his psychiatrist in order to make sure she got the medications that were appropriate, and he continued to provide therapy to her after that date.
And I have no objection to this witness being asked all kinds of questions about his treatment and his analysis and his conversations with Julie Jensen. I object to hearsay. And but furthermore, it is true that that Mr. DeFazio
It was Dr. Jensen's
can make his
notes.
diagnosis based upon hearsay documents, just as Dr. Mainland did, Dr. Chambliss did. I understand that, but
There's a reason why he's objecting so steadfastly on this, because what they're about to enter in was Dr. Jensen's notation for the reason for giving her these drugs. This is why he's almost beat red and about to lose his shit. And if it comes in, he is definitely going to lose his shit, because it basically says that she's got depression, like suicidal thoughts, blah, 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 something of that sort. I'm almost imagining that's what's going to come in if they allow it in. But the judge has been ruling in prosecution's favor quite a bit. So I don't know how he's going to rule on this.
Dr. Chambliss was not allowed to express hearsay through his testimony, and neither was Dr. Mainland. So for example,
they came in as professionals.
Reports came in through Joe Crafassi, not through Dr. Mainland. Now on cross-examination,
They weren't lay witnesses.
Could have brought
Big
in anything
difference.
they wanted in cross-examination concerning the bases of Dr. Mainland or Dr. Chambliss's testimony. But we had this discussion, Your Honor, about the bases for expert testimony well in advance of trial. You probably remember that conversation, the discussion that occurred, the collegial conversation that occurred between the court and counsel, and it pertained to the letter. And I felt that I expressed the view that the state should be able to cross-examine Dr. West about Julie's letter, because it was even though it was hearsay, something she relied upon, and the court ruled that I couldn't do that. And I thought that was within the realm of the court's discretion to make that ruling, and we've actually more than abided by that court's ruling. However, there was this discussion about how the proponent of expert testimony cannot bring in hearsay documents. So I indicated that I couldn't bring in the letter through Dr. Mainland's testimony or Dr. Chambliss's testimony because
they were expert witnesses, not lay witnesses.
The proponent of that expert testimony. But that when the defense was the proponent of Dr. West's testimony, I can cross-examine Dr. West about hearsay, which I still can't accept everything except for that letter. I can cross.
Not going to have a Jensen 4.
That is correct. And so, and as you know, the state has sedulously complied with, and in fact has exceeded the court's order. We've gone well beyond what the court ordered us to do in terms of avoiding the reference to the letter like it's the third rail of politics or something. We just don't go into it at all, even as much as we could have. I didn't ask. We didn't present any testimony about the letter. Even admissible testimony, we did not present it about the letter. We've had this discussion, Your Honor, about what the proponent of an expert can present. And the proponent of an expert's testimony cannot present the hearsay to the fact finder through using this expert as a conduit. Only the opponent on the cross-examination can that be done.
I'll give you one more shot, Ms. Girl.
Mr. DeFazio is not on our expert witness list. He is a fact witness, just like he was last time. The testimony I'm getting from Mr. DeFazio is consistent with the testimony that was received last time, including the information that was in the record, the business record of the psychotherapy clinic, which included Dr. Newman's one-page report because of the consultation about medication. This is not hearsay under 90803 sub 6, records of regularly conducted activity, a memorandum, report, or data compilation in any form of acts, events, conditions, opinions, or diagnosis made at or near the time by or from information transmitted by a person with knowledge, all in the course of regularly conducted activity as shown by the testimony of the custodian or other qualified witness. That's what we have here. Mr. DeFazio, his clinic, testified that these records were kept in the regular course of their business activity, and as a result should be allowed to testify, especially since he has the knowledge because he referred Julie Jensen to his in-house psychiatrist, and working together, they provided the information and the medication needed to treat Julie Jensen. This is not a proponent as it relates to an expert. This is a witness, a fact witness of Julie Jensen and her treatment, testifying about records as part of regular business activity.
All right, I gave the attorneys plenty of time to argue the case, and I appreciate your comments, but I'm going to let it in under 908.
Yes.
Records of regularly conducted.
Yes. Ooh.
It's been testified to by this witness that
Slammed.
part of the information and the records that were kept by his office. So we will continue. Let's bring the jury.
Oh, can't wait to see what this letter says. Of course, Daisy Girl already knows what the letter says. Oh, that really got the prosecution just bent. Oh, yes, I agree. I agree. On both sides. I mean, I've seen him go for the prosecution and against the prosecution. So I have to agree.
All right, we got all 16. I think we got one missing.
Oh, now he's sucking up.
All right, we got everybody back in the courtroom. The jury's back. The appearances are the same. Ms. Krause, you can continue with your direct.
Mr. DeFazio, I was referring to the page from Dr. Newman's notes that are dated October 8th of 1990.
Yes.
And the first couple of lines seem to be some general information that you've already testified to about Julie Jensen.
Yes.
Regarding her marriage and her son.
Yes.
Is that right? And then the second line, full line, also talks about her son. Is that what you see?
That is correct.
And then the third line, can you read what that says?
David was does
it say months?
4 months old. Neighbor lady about her age.
And then can you read the line after that?
First, I don't know what that first word is.
If I showed you your testimony from last time, would that refresh your memory?
Correct. Yes, it would, hopefully.
I think it's page. Let me know if that refreshes.
Nice. We'll have to check it out
Okay.
tonight after I get done here.
Mr. DeFazio, are you able to remember what that line says?
The overall feeling, I believe, at that point.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I really am. My thoughts and prayers, Puffer. I mean, Rabbit, I'm sorry. My thoughts and prayers. Really.
Point was that Julie was crying all the time. She had a lot of struggle leaving for work and leaving the baby home and the separation from the baby.
And then there's a line that starts, I think, with husband.
Husband feels she is too emotional with child.
Could it be involved?
Involved. That's right. Involved.
And then the next line, can you read that?
No appetite. Enjoyed cooking. Not a. Well, can't read that last word there.
Did it say now a chore?
Now a chore. That could be very well.
Is that something you see with a patient who might be depressed? Something they enjoyed is now a chore?
Correct. That's one of the things we look at is things that normally give them pleasure and happiness no longer just make them, they become somewhat apathetic with things and just withdraw.
So that would be like a sign of depression?
Yes.
Objection. Counsel's leading the witness.
Sustained, rephrase it.
Would you consider that a sign of depression?
Yes.
Still objection. That's still a leading question.
It is, but let's stick with the answer. Let's continue.
Does loss of appetite mean anything to you?
Usually that's an indication it's that there's some problem. Appetite is usually affected either, it changes. So either there's an increase in appetite and people gain weight because they're depressed, or people lose weight depending. There's no rhyme or reason, but both qualities. There's a change in appetite behavior.
And when you say that both qualities, what do you mean by that? What does that have some importance as it relates to a diagnosis?
It usually is another symptom, not solely would it be considered, but another symptom among others that there's depression.
If you go to the bottom of that document, the second to last line written by Dr. Newman, can you tell us what that says?
Chronically depressed, cry easily, I think
And-
it is.
So did you say chronically depressed, cry easily?
Yes.
And then what's the last line?
DST arranged.
Do you know what that means?
In those days, again, that was one of the indicators there could be to show a chemical imbalance. We really don't use that now as much anymore, very seldom. But sometimes if it turns out, and it's not an absolute. So if there is an indication of something being positive, it doesn't mean that much, but it's another sign. And so Dr. Newman, at that time, it was prudent to just kind of run a DST on her to see what the results would be.
Do you know what the results were?
I think the best of my recollection, I thought they were, it was normal, but I have to look, whatever it was in the last recording was the testimony that would be accurate. And I think it was normal.
Should be testified last time that it was normal. That's consistent with your memory?
Yes.
I'm going to take you back to your notes. I think we talked about October 23rd of 1990. Do you see the next note is February 12th of 1991?
Yes.
And what does that say?
It indicates that stability, emotional, I think, to the best of my recollection, if what I ever put in the testimony at that point, that she was stable and there was some signs of improving, that there was some improvement noted.
And the next note, what date is that?
There was a 2/26/91 that doesn't have anything after it.
It would be fair, based upon your how you keep notes, that you saw Ms. Jensen that day?
It's uncertain that I can't really say.
There's nothing there that says patient canceled.
No,
Can you make sure you talk to
no.
the microphone?
Nothing there that says that.
And then the next note is March 12th of 1991.
Yes.
Are you able to tell what that says?
I believe it says fight, something regarding, I really can't read that.
That's fair. I don't think you could read it in 2008 either, sir.
Okay.
I'm going to take you to March 28th of 1991. Can you
Okay.
tell what that says?
Job, something of husband, increase, it's possible job loss of husband, increase in anxiety, but I'd have to check out what I did at that point. See you in 2 weeks.
And if in 2008 you said the same thing, That's what your memory is now.
Yes.
And then the next one, it says, I think is April 6th of 1991.
Okay. I can't distinguish that.
I'm going to show you your prior testimony from 2008 and see if that refreshes your memory. I'm going to ask you to look at line 25, 24, 25, and then also line 3.
Yes, we're going to start joint sessions, I think it says.
Mr. DeFazio, can you tell us again what that says?
It was a time I felt that we should start having some joint sessions. Prior to this, I was seeing them individually, and it developed to a point where it would be advantageous, I felt, to see them together.
Now, there's a couple of more notes from April 30th and May 14th. Is that what you see in front of you?
Yes.
And then there's at the bottom, it looks like there's 3 notes. And tell me if you can tell us the dates of those notes.
On the April 30th, I rescheduled because of the fact that it must have been, sometimes what will happen is if I run way behind on the schedule and I don't want to have another session and just do it hastily, it's a waste of time and it doesn't accomplish anything. And then sometimes maybe the patient might be running late, and then you sit there and you are all in therapy, most of them are time related, so that if a person runs, and it can happen, a person runs 20 minutes late and you have a 45-minute session, you can't get done what you're supposed to, so we just kind of reschedule it and so forth. So the IRS stands for I rescheduled, no charge, because if it's something that I do, I don't charge the patient the no-show fee or whatever.
And then May 28th, is that the same thing?
Yes.
It says IRS, is that right?
Correct.
And then there's a June 4th, 1991 that I'm not going to ask you about. And then a June 18th of 1991 right under that. Do you see that?
That's correct.
And do you know what that says?
Patient doesn't feel progress. And I can't read it on the bottom there.
If I showed you your testimony from 08, would that refresh your memory as to what that note
Yes.
is? I'm going to look at lines 21 through 23. Let me know if that refreshes your memory as to that.
Yes.
And what did that note say, sir?
Based upon what I wrote there, and at that time, I should note, since I'm referring back, everything I did after the testimony of during the February 2008 hearing, I feel comfortable with when I left the testimony. So I believe at that time the patient had indicated things weren't moving fast enough, and they were thinking of, or she was wanting to get another therapist.
Do you know if Ms. Jensen got another therapist after that date?
To the best of my recollection, whatever I had indicated there, but I can't think of it as we speak today. I can't recall.
You don't see any referral notes or notes as to another therapist on there? Or do you see any, I guess I should say?
I don't see any right here.
If we go back to that first page of the document as it relates to the medication that was prescribed to Ms. Jensen, what was the last date that medication samples were given to Ms. Jensen?
According to here, January 30th.
Is that April?
Oh, excuse me, that's right. Well, there was something here. That is April, because I can't. The writing comes out as on 1 instead of a 4, but I'm comfortable with, yeah, April 30th, 1991, and it was the Prozac 20 milligrams.
And that was the typical prescription for Prozac in 1991?
Yes.
Now, during this time, you had did you have some meetings with Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
And do you remember how many meetings you had with Mr. Jensen?
I can't recall exactly.
If you go to the last 2 pages of the document, are you able to tell from the dates and notes how many meetings you had with Mr. Jensen?
Possibly 4. I wouldn't say with total certainty, but whatever I indicated in the record there.
There's a number of times from the document that Mr. Jensen rescheduled, or you rescheduled?
Yes.
I'm going to refer you to the June 18th, 1991 note, which you just talked about as it related to Julie Jensen, determining that it wasn't moving, progress wasn't fast enough. Is there a note as it relates to Mr. Jensen?
That I don't recall.
Do you see the note there, June 28th, 1991?
June 18th.
June 18th.
Yeah,
Yes.
June 18th. And can you tell us what that says?
Patient canceled, no charge. Wants marital therapy. Important. Husband, please, but something follow her directive. I can't exactly say what this is in there, but the first part I know. Patient cancel, we didn't charge. Wants marital therapy. Impatient or important. It was either important or impatient. Husband pleased, but something follow.
Does it say what will follow wife's direction?
I think that makes sense. Yes.
And the first time you met with Mr. Jensen was on September 11th of 1990.
Yes.
And did you describe his wife at that time?
I can't say. Whatever I put in there, to the best of my recollection, would be in there in the testimony that I did
If I
2008.
show you that testimony from 2008, would that refresh your memory as to what that note is?
Yes.
I objection, Your Honor. Any statement that Mark Jensen made about his wife is hearsay.
It's an exception under 908.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's regularly business record.
No, Your Honor, it's a statement.
Hang on. Guess what? We're taking our morning break, folks.
Oh. It's part of this. Jeez Louise.
The jury's outside the court. First of all, Ms. Crosby, which statute did you say the exception was?
The same one that we talked about last time, Judge, the business record exception, which would make this not hearsay. I'm not asking Mr. DeFazio what Mark Jensen said, Julie Jensen said. I'm asking Mr. DeFazio what his records indicate Mark Jensen said on that day.
Which means, Your Honor, it's clearly not a business record. It's not a record of his regularly conducted activity. It's a record of what Mark Jensen said to him. That's not a regularly conducted activity. That's Mark Jensen's hearsay statements about his wife's condition. It's not a regularly conducted business. It's not anything to do with the conduct of their business. It's Mark Jensen's hearsay statements about his wife.
Yeah, but he went to see this gentleman, and this gentleman wrote notes. That's his own notes of what was said.
Uh-huh.
Just let's get back to this notion about police reports. Police reports are also business records. They don't come, however, the business records,
He
and
is-
police reports that contain
he
hearsay
is so
statements of witnesses
pissed.
are not admissible simply because they're in a police report. And hearsay statements that are contained within a business record are not admissible. The record itself of a regularly conducted activity, like opening the office at 8:30 in the morning, closing the office at 4:30 p.m.
He's gonna
those are
keep
regularly
repeating
conducted
this.
business activities. But
He's
statements that people
losing.
make within the context of a business, that doesn't make them automatically admissible. Now, if a statement is made for purposes of medical diagnosis or treatment, when Mark Jensen's talking about his own condition, that's a statement for medical purposes, for purposes of medical treatment or diagnosis. But this is Mark Jensen's hearsay statements about his wife.
Go ahead. I'll give you a chance to respond.
Police reports are business records, but they don't fall under this exception because they're made for the purpose of litigation. The records that Mr. DeFazio and his clinic kept, regularly conducted business records, are not made for the purpose of litigation. I already read 90803 sub 6. This fits within the exact same exception as the previous records. These were kept by his business. These are not writings of Mr. Jensen. These are writings of Mr. DeFazio kept as part of his business records, and I already laid the foundation for those.
Oh, they're
So, Your Honor, the state
going to
can admit-
I'll give you
argue
one
it.
more time to argue.
the state can admit any of the defendant's statements that we want as a statement by a party opponent. These are statements by a party opponent. The fact that they're made to a third party doesn't make them anything other than statements by a party opponent. Mark Jensen's statements to this person or any other person are Mark Jensen's statements. So the state can admit them as a statement by a party opponent, and the defense cannot.
Judge, that exception statement of a party opponent is a different hearsay exception. I'm not arguing that one. I'm talking about the hearsay exception under sub 6.
All right, we're going to take our break after this. The jury's taking their break up. I'm going to let it in again under 90806. So it's coming in. Let's take our 10-minute break.
Do it. Oh, thank you, Cool Frog. He's going to go look at the statute. Ah, I love it. Well, and well, all I can say is, thoughts and prayers for Rabbit. We love the rabbit. Hello, Andrea. Good to see you. Good to see
We're back
you.
on the record. Mark Jensen, 2002 CF 314. The appearances
Welcome
are
for the
same.
other side of the
Witness, Paul
world.
DeFazio, still under oath. You can continue, Ms. Krause.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. DeFazio, I'm going to take you back to that September 11th, 1990 note on Mark Jensen's record. I think it's the very first one. Should be the second to last page.
Right.
Do you have it there?
Yes.
And can you tell us what the first line of that September 11th, 1990 treatment note says?
Conference with husband.
And then the second line,
Wanting to make changes.
and the next line,
Dropped out of nursing school.
and the line after that,
Highs and lows.
the next line,
Hope that explains it.
Life. I can't distinguish that next word.
and then the note under that,
Fixed on son, 7 months.
and the line after that,
Stop
Rabbit had to
breastfeeding.
head out.
and then the line
So-
after that,
Fears that she will end up like her mother.
and then under that.
See you in 3
Just
weeks.
keep her in your
And
thoughts
is that the first
or your
meeting that you had
prayers
with
if
Mr.
you
Jensen
pray.
from your records?
From best of my recollection, I can't say absolutely for sure, but if it would be revealed in the last testimony,
But that's the first notation as to Mr. Jensen's record.
I think so, yes.
And you already told us about the June 18th, 1991 notation, which is the last time you actually saw Mr. Jensen. Is that right?
Correct.
One of the things I asked you about at the beginning of your testimony was whether you have ever had a mother with a young child commit suicide.
Yes.
Do you remember being asked that question in 2008?
No, I don't.
If I showed you a copy of your testimony, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Page 109. I'm going to ask you to review like pages through 24. See if that refreshes your recollection.
I would say at this point, I remember saying that, but I don't remember I don't see anybody in terms of that in my face that I can recollect.
So in 2008, your testimony was that you did have a mother with small children commit suicide.
That is correct.
What you're telling us is today you can't remember who that would have been.
Yes, that's correct.
That's all I have, Mr. DeFazio. Thank you.
Mr. Jamboys, are you doing the cross?
I am, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good morning,
Oh,
Mr. DeFazio.
so mad.
Now, you've been in practice, you said, since 1970, right?
But practically private practice since 1971.
So 52 years.
That's correct.
And in their 52 years of practice, how many patients have you seen?
It's kind of amazing to count since I never anticipated being in this long, but into the thousands.
And you don't remember every one of them, do you?
Right.
As you're sitting here today, do you have any recollection whatsoever of Julie Jensen?
Yes, I do.
And so you have some recollection of her, and then you're looking at your notes concerning her.
Yes.
Do you have a very clear recollection of it, or is this just a vague recollection of?
A vague recollection.
Might it help you if you saw a picture of her? Might that help refresh your recollection further?
I have seen recent pictures and I recollect a little more, but again, the details of that having been that many years in 1990, 1991, I don't know. I can't say with certainty that if I saw her in a store that I would say, hi, Julie, and know her.
Well, you know you're not going to see her in the
Right.
store.
That is correct.
I'm going to show you a document, the photograph that I believe is marked as Exhibit 1. Screen, please.
And this is for
Bring your
Rabbit.
attention to the screen. There's been testimony that this depicts Julie Jensen approximately the year 1997. Does that provide you any further recollection of Julie Jensen?
I would have to say no.
So the person that's depicted in front of her, the little boy standing, is her son David, and he appears to be about 7 years old at that point.
Okay.
Now, the last time you saw Julie Jensen, David was about 8 months or so old. Is that true?
Yes.
So between the last time you saw Julie Jensen and the time this photo was taken, there's a lot of water under the bridge, right?
Yes.
So anything that you saw or said about Julie Jensen concerning her behavior in 1990 and 1991 doesn't provide a lot of insight into what was going on in her life in 1998, does it?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled. Go ahead, answer.
Did you hear my question, sir?
Yes. I have to think about that. What I would say is whatever I said in that testimony in 2008 would be accurate because now the years have passed. What I remembered and didn't remember as far as she goes.
Okay, Your Honor, I request that answer be stricken as non-responsive, and I'll restate the question.
Why don't you restate the question and the answer be stricken?
Now, Mr. DeFazio, between the time that you last saw Julie Jensen in 1991 and the time this photograph was taken in about 1997, there was a lot of water under the bridge, right?
Yes. And
what you saw or experienced in talking with Mark and Julie Jensen in 1990 and 1991, to your knowledge, has no bearing at all on her condition in 1998, does it?
Correct.
So, and for that matter, what Mark Jensen said in 1990 or 1991 has no bearing on the family dynamics that were at play in 1998.
Good play by the
True?
prosecution.
Yes. Because things change.
Yes.
For example,
Good
they had a
job.
child, as you saw in that photograph, there was a toddler seated on a bike seat behind Julie Jensen, right?
Yes.
And so Douglas hadn't been born when you were talking with Julie.
Yes.
Now, defense counsel on cross-examination, on direct examination, had asked you about sometimes people don't tell you the truth when you're seeing them, right?
That is correct.
And that just doesn't apply to women; it applies to men as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now, when you were seeing Julie Jensen, this was pretty much what's all about Julie, right? What's wrong with Julie, right?
She was the primary patient.
Yes, and you were diagnosing what's wrong with Julie, right?
Yes.
Would you agree that a fair number of the women you see, the problem with that the women are experiencing is not the woman, it's the jerk they're married to?
Judge, I would object as argumentative.
Yeah, that's
I'm not making any statement. Don't take my position, but go ahead and ask the question.
So does that mean that the objection was overruled, Your Honor?
It's overruled.
Okay. So I'd request the question be read back to him.
Would you agree that there are a number of women you see the problem the women are experiencing is not the woman, it's the jerk they are married to?
intentional. Yeah.
I would have to say with all respect, when you add the word jerk in there, it has a connotation that I would say it would decrease the accuracy of the question, meaning an answer.
Oh, because
Nice.
So you don't think that you've seen any women who are married to jerks?
I don't believe I said that. I have seen those.
Well, I'm asking you the question. When you've seen these women who've been married to jerks, was that a big part of the problem these women were experiencing?
This guy's
It's very possible there's a high degree of problem.
Yeah. Now, in this case, Julie Jensen was married to a man who thought that she was paying too much attention to her 8-month-old baby. Isn't that true?
Yes.
She wasn't paying enough attention to him. She was paying too much attention to her 8-month-old baby, right?
There were changes in the situation due to the baby coming into the relationship. And obviously they would have to dilute the relationship between the two of them so that it's a possibility that the relationship was diluted. But
Diluted. I'm not talking about a diluted relationship. I'm talking about a man complaining that his wife is spending too much time on the baby and not enough time on him. That's what I'm asking about. That's what Mark Jensen complained about, right? She was too focused on the baby.
yes,
Do you think it's appropriate that a mother should be focused on her 8-month-old baby?
yes.
Maybe less focused on her adult man, a husband who's supposed to be able to take care of himself?
Yes, I think that is true, but it enters in, it's not something that could be answered in a simple statement, one question.
Your Honor, objection. This is non-responsive. Beyond the word yes, I believe that is true.
He's trying to answer it, so let him finish it, and we'll go to the next question. Go ahead and finish your answer.
Many times things are not so black and white in the sense that obviously, as I discussed earlier in testimony, adding a child to the family changes the atmosphere and dynamics of the family. And then one has to go deeper into looking at how the family of origins, the perception of what a role of father is, what a role of mother is, and possibly also it's a complicated situation. What the stress factor is in terms of adding this. Is it a financial stress? Is it a time stretch? Or are there some possibly other issues that come in that was one of the parents not really wanting to be a parent, but did it to please the other parent? So and it's hard for me as a behavioral person to answer the question in a yes or no. It's much like, did you stop beating your wife? Yes or no. It can be a no, not representing anything. But
I object to all this. This is non-responsive. I want him to answer my questions and not just give us a great big long lecture about things I didn't even ask him about. I request you instruct the witness to answer my question.
Ask another question. Let's move on.
So
Ask him
you
a
indicate that
different
sometimes
question.
your patients
Oh,
will
he's
tell you the truth.
pissed.
Isn't that true?
yes,
And
Oh,
probably if somebody maybe they drink a little bit more than they should, when they go to talk to the doctor, they might not say, well, doctor, I drink more than I should. That means people kind of minimize some of the problems in their life.
yes,
And that's not a good idea, is it? Because we go to people to get treatment, we should be telling them the complete and honest truth, right?
yes,
But in your experience, sometimes patients leave things out.
yes.
Now, in this case, for example, Mark Jensen didn't tell you, Doc or Mr. DeFazio, I have this really strange obsession with penises. He never said anything like that to you, did he?
That is correct.
And a bizarre and total strange preoccupation obsession with penises
I don't know.
adversely affect the sexual
sounds like
relationship he
the
might have with his wife.
prosecutor might have a little strange
feel like Paul
obsession
Beckman's-
with him.
Well, if Mark Jensen had told you, Mr. DeFazio, I have this very strange preoccupation with penises, and that's affecting my relationship, my sexual relationship with my wife, what would you have done with that information?
I probably would have put that as a thought of possibly other issues in that area and just reserved it at that time in my, whether it's in the writing or in my mind in terms of dealing with, is there some problem there? Or, obviously, is it dysfunctional or has it interfered with their relationship?
So, Mr. DeFazio, the first time you saw Julie, you diagnosed or you had the referral for limited postpartum depression. Is that true?
Yes, to rule out postpartum depression, but also adult situational reaction with mixed features.
Now, let's talk about adult situational reaction with mixed features. Is that just a kind of a fancy way of saying, well, gee, she's got some difficulties in her life?
That's the diagnosis used to indicate that. You're right.
So, for example, if she was married to a self-absorbed guy who doesn't help around the house and doesn't want her spending all her time with her children, with her child, that might reflect a determination of adult situational reaction with mixed features.
With other things, yes.
So with mixed features, it's not some of the other factors, or the situational factors. It's with mixed features like maybe depression.
Depression, yes, and anxiety.
Now, you talked about alcoholism. That was Julie's concerns about her mother, correct?
Yes.
One of her concerns about her mother, correct?
Yes.
Julie never exhibited any signs or any manifestation whatsoever of alcoholism herself, did she?
To the best of my recollection, whatever I stated on the notes of the last hearing, that would be accurate.
Well, did you testify at the last hearing? Well, you said you had partial recollection of this case, right?
So at that point, I didn't feel at that point an indication that alcohol was a major problem.
Well, Mark didn't tell you that Mark was bad-mouthing his wife to you, and he didn't say anything about her being an alcoholic, did he?
Judge, I would object as to argumentative.
Why don't you rephrase it, Mr. Jim?
Mark Jensen didn't tell you that he thought his wife was an alcoholic?
Correct.
And you did an intake sheet with Julie Jensen, correct?
Yes.
You have it in front of you? Make sure we're both talking about the same document. It's Exhibit 101. Defense counsel is graciously advised.
Oh, excuse me. I don't I have it in here.
So on the bottom of this page, it's signed Julie Jensen and dated June 29, 1990.
Yes.
And she indicates the question is, what do you expect to accomplish from therapy? And she wrote, improve attitude and
Yes.
self-esteem.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about attitude and self-esteem. You can put the document down now, Mr. DeFazio. Would it be fair to say that a woman who's in an unhappy marriage or an unhappy relationship with an abusive spouse might need to improve her attitude and might have low self-esteem?
Yes.
I would object as to argumentative and states facts, not evidence.
I still like this better.
I'm going to allow it. Go ahead. I give you a lot of leeway on direct. Go ahead.
So you need the question right back to you, sir?
Yes, would you?
No, but I'll ask the reporter to do that.
Talk about attitude and self-esteem. Would it be fair to say that a woman who is in an unhappy marriage or unhappy relationship with an abusive spouse might need to improve her attitude and low self-esteem?
Yes.
Now, she also indicated that there's a question, has immediate problem affected your functioning? And the answer is yes, correct?
Yes.
And then you list things. Number one, work, and she circled yes, correct?
Yes.
Because now we're looking back at the document again, sir. I'm sorry, I should make that clear to you. So looking back at that part of Exhibit 101, has immediate problem affected your functioning? And the answer is circled yes, correct?
That's correct.
And then work, and the answer is circled yes.
Yes.
And number two is sleep, and the answer is circled yes.
Correct.
And number three is appetite, and the answer is circled no.
Correct.
And then four, family life at home, and the answer is circled yes.
Correct.
She lists her church or group affiliation as St. Paul's Lutheran.
Yes.
Under troubles with neighbors, she says no.
Correct.
And under alcoholic beverages, she's X'd never and rarely. Correct?
Correct.
And have you ever been treated for alcoholism? The answer is no. Correct?
Correct.
And then there's, but at the bottom, there's a series of questions and epilepsy, convulsions, and so forth. And then under depression, anxiety, the answer is no, correct?
Yes, correct.
In other words, have you ever had any of the following? Please circle depression, anxiety, and the answer is circled no, correct?
That is correct.
And under recent change in appetite, she circled no.
Correct.
And that's as of June 29th, 1990. Julie Jensen was not being treated for alcoholism. She was not an alcoholic when you were seeing her.
That is correct.
You were treating her, you thought you were ruling out limited postpartum depression, and then you diagnosed adult situational reaction with mixed features. And then on September 4th, 1990, it says depression seasonal. Is that a seasonal affective disorder? Is that what you mean by that?
It's more where sometimes what happens in the fall or spring, depression that does exist, it comes out. Some people beyond just, oh, it's fall and I'm not looking forward to winter, or spring. Oh, good, it's spring, the weather's getting warmer, no snow type of thing. So that could be an indicator of something more than the average person goes. And so that most of us happen to like the spring or the fall, and so or look at fall as anticipating winter. So could be an indicator.
Now, Mr. DeFazio, have you ever had occasion to treat a narcissist or diagnose somebody with narcissism?
Yes, in terms of the first question.
What are some of the features that you observe in a narcissistic personality disorder?
Pretty much by the definition, they're thinking as the world relates to them as opposed to as the world relates to the average person. So then, in other words, if you look at somebody that you know is a real good, you like that person real much, and she says, or he says to you, I lost my parent to cancer, and it's just a tragic thing. It was a fast death and so forth. You can't possibly miss the loss of that person yourself. You've never met her or him. You don't know that person. But knowing that that person that you like real much is hurting, your feelings can go and extend to that person. You can feel badly that day or that period after getting that news because you know how that person must feel. A narcissist doesn't necessarily feel that. Might feel only, he lost his mother. Now we were planning to go up north skiing, and now I can't go because he's got to go to the funeral.
So for a narcissist, it's all about him.
You are correct.
It's like the narcissist is the sun, and everything else is a planet that revolves around the sun.
Yes.
So when Mark Jensen was complaining that Julie is too involved with the child, that suggests to Mark Jensen that he's looking at how this child is affecting his life, right?
I would say qualified, yes.
And when he's complaining, and now Julie was distraught about having to be away from her baby for 35 hours a week. Isn't that true?
Yes.
She had a job she was a 25 hours a week job, but she had to commute 10 hours during that week to get to and from her work, correct?
Yes.
So she had 35 hours away from her baby.
Yes.
And Julie was upset about being away from her baby.
Yes.
And Mark Jensen thought that she was just too preoccupied with her baby.
Yes.
And Julie was concerned that Mark Jensen wasn't helping her enough around the house, that she had too much to do because she had to work, she had to care for the baby, and then she had to do everything else that she was supposed to do at home, and Mark wasn't helping her out, right?
Correct.
But Mark's concern was that Julie was too focused on her baby.
Yes.
So might that be a contributing factor to the situational, I don't know what they call that, situational reaction?
Features.
I'm sorry,
Adult situational reaction with mixed features.
Situational reaction. So the situation Julie was reacting to was a husband who thought she was spending too much time on the baby and not enough time with him. That was part of the situation, wasn't it?
Judge, I would ask that Mr. DeFazio be allowed to answer the question.
Would you let him finish the answer, Mr. Demos?
I like the word contributing to as opposed to just being the factor. So it could have contributed, but we can't say not enough information was known on other things to make that statement being the fact that it caused it or anything.
There you go.
Well, certainly, when we're talking about
There you
information,
go.
I asked you about this. Mark Jensen never told you anything about what appears to be a very bizarre obsession with penises.
To the best of my knowledge, I don't remember it. And if I didn't have it in my testimony, I don't recall that.
So I'm asking, well, you understand the jury has been sitting here for a couple of weeks. They've heard testimony that Mark Jensen has like over 2,000 penis photos on his computer. You would agree that that reflects a rather bizarre, unusual obsession with penises, doesn't it?
Judge, I would object as to the facts not in evidence and the argumentative nature of the question.
Telling me the issue of the penises is not in evidence?
No, that's not what I said, Judge.
You just said that.
I meant
Not in evidence. That's what the question he asked.
I meant the number, but that's fine. It's also an argumentative question.
Just rephrase it and we'll move on.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. Okay, hypothetically, if a man has a whole bunch of penis photos in his computer, and they're organized according to files of small, medium, and favorites, and they number in the hundreds, that would reflect an unusual and probably unhealthy obsession with penises, correct?
Yes.
I mean, regardless of whether you're a heterosexual or homosexual, it's just unusual to have that kind of a preoccupation with penises.
Yes.
You would agree with that hypothetical?
Yes.
And then hypothetically, if you were aware that the man had required his
So what am I
girlfriend
going to
to
do
describe to
with
him
all
in great
those
detail
pictures of
the size,
boobs I
shape,
have
and circumference of every
categorized?
penis she'd ever seen, that would also reflect a rather bizarre and unusual
Bizarre,
preoccupation with penises.
unusual.
Yes.
And that kind of a bizarre fixation or obsession could certainly adversely affect the relationship that exists between a man and a woman, couldn't it?
Yes.
And so that could also be a contributing factor to this reactive adult situational reaction, correct?
Contributing, yes.
A contributing factor.
Boob pics.
So when was the last time you saw Julie Jensen?
I believe it was in 1991. Was that about whatever that date was?
And when did you last see Mark Jensen?
I have to look at what the record would say. It's probably there. I don't. Possible in June or July of 1991. June or July. I would have to look at the exact.
No, you indicated on your notes that Julie, toward the end of her evening sessions with you, she was talking about going in a different direction. Is that-
Oh, yeah. Oh, boobs. Boobs.
I can't really locate.
They're all
If you could locate that
categorized.
for me so I could see it.
I would accept. I didn't have that document, so council has to go. What page is it? I didn't have one.
Oh,
Asking about.
I think I just found it. June 18th, 1991.
And what do your notes reflect, if you can read it?
Canceled. Wants marital therapy. Husband, please. What will follow? He was pleased apparently with the current treatment, but he was going to follow whatever she said that directive. At least the summary of what that note says.
So that was Mark's statement, not Julie's statement.
I can't recall who said it and whether it was a. Right here, I said patient canceled, but sometimes maybe by phone, I'm on. This is a testimony here. It could be that the patient canceled and said, "I'm seeking other help." I can't recall that, and whatever I had said in the last testimony would be the valid answer I felt comfortable with. Wants marital therapy.
give him it back. Made sure he took it from him. That's what he did. You see that, right? He made sure that he took it away from him. Now he's going to wander around. And he'll set it back over there.
So June 18th, 1991 says something canceled.
Patient canceled.
Wants
Marital therapy. I think that says important.
important, or impatient.
Maybe it was impatient. I can't tell.
So it's either important, maybe impatient.
Husband, please, but we'll follow.
Wife's direction.
Are we on the record or are we asking?
I'm asking him questions about. Yes, I'm hoping it's on the record. It's about Exhibit 100.
Oh, he's so.
And as you're sitting here today,
he is so
do you know if that
steamed.
note was based on Julie's conversation with you
No
or Mark
booby
Jensen's
pics.
conversation?
I can't recall.
Oh no!
Were you aware that on June 24th, 1991, Julie Jensen
I don't
petitioned
have
filed
a
petition for
collection of
divorce from Mark
boob
Jensen?
pics.
To the best of my recollection, no, unless something showed up in the testimony that I had before.
Well, what I'm asking you is if were you aware, and I will indicate the jury's aware because the petition for divorce, a petition for divorce was filed by Julie Jensen on June 24th, 1991, and you were not aware of the fact that Julie Jensen was going to file for divorce.
I can't recall that.
And you were unaware that earlier in the year, in the spring, Julie Jensen had a brief affair with a guy by the name of Perry Tarica.
I would have to refer to the testimony that I gave.
Well, your notes don't reflect anything about Julie telling you that she had an affair with Perry Tarica or any other person in early 1991 and in the spring of 1991.
I'd have to give the same answer that I gave the last time.
Well, I know you've raised this issue before about your testimony last. All I want you to testify about is what you can see by looking at your notes or what you independently recall from 1991. As you're sitting here in 2023, it would be understandable if you don't have a specific and independent recollection of each and every entry in your reports or in your records. So I invite you to look at your record of the times that you saw Julie in 1991. And that's the first time it reflects February 12th, 1991. Is that true? Do you want me to show you the page I'm looking at, Mr. DeFazio? Would that help you? Here, I'll show you what I'm looking at.
Okay.
So now we're
Okay, we're on the same page.
So you know, it reflects February 12th, 1991, stability, emotional,
horrible.
correct?
Correct.
And then I can't read what it says underneath there. Can you read it?
Improving.
And then on February 26th, 1991, you got the date there, but you don't write anything, correct?
That is true. That's
And then on March 12th, 1991, what does it say there?
fight him regarding outcome. I can't read that note.
Okay, well, let's do this. Look at the note from March 12th, 1991, March 28th, 1991, April 6th, 1991, April 16th, 1991, April 30th, 1991, May 14th, 1991, May 28th, 1991. Just look through all of your notes pertaining to those dates and indicate to me whether or not Julie Jensen, do you have any notes in there that Julie Jensen disclosed to you that she had a one-weekend affair with a guy by the name of Perry Tarica?
Oh,
I do not see that.
And certainly if a person you're seeing for marital counseling and other types of counseling had disclosed to you that she just had an affair, that would certainly affect therapy, wouldn't it?
Yes.
You would make a note of that, right?
Correct.
And there's no note of that.
Not that I can see.
So perhaps in sometime between March of 1991 and June 18th of 1991, Julie had clearly come to a decision as to what was really wrong with her, right?
Objection argumentative.
Overrule, go ahead.
Well, there's nothing here reflects that she was satisfied with the treatment she was receiving at your hands. I mean, she didn't tell you, oh, I've got a solution now, I'm all better.
That is correct.
So since she filed for divorce in June of 1991, to be specific, June 24th of 1991, it seems that Julie had come to a realization as to what she needed to do to address her adult situational reaction.
Objection speculation.
objection. Yes.
She concluded by June 24th of 1991 that the problem wasn't Julie, the problem was the guy Julie was married to.
Objection.
I can only say that she was obviously unsatisfied with her situation and took steps to change it.
By divorcing her husband, by filing a petition for divorce from her husband.
That is correct.
It's objection. Calls for speculation.
So in terms of the medication that was provided to Julie, first of all, they were all samples, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, unless there was something in the record, on the record, we put it in the chart if we gave samples, because obviously if it were through a pharmacy, there'd be another recording of it at that point. So I don't know. We used to have drug cards. They were large index cards that would put the medication on there. So if they were coming from a pharmacy, it would be ordered. This would be ordered. So this was samples, and they were listed as samples.
And the only drug that was listed is Prozac, right?
That is correct.
Now, did you ever, I forgot, was this a book or an article? Something called Prozac Nation? Did you ever hear about that book or that article?
No.
Well, you were aware of the fact that at some point there was this discussion in the public's eye about that there was a lot of Prozac being prescribed across America, correct?
There was some talk about, I can't recall the exact article that you're referring to necessarily, but there's always been in the field discussion of medication versus the therapy or and so forth. So there could be some discussion of that.
And Prozac was very freely prescribed and probably.
Back here, old big guy right here. He needs to lay off whatever drug he is on that's got him just like shaking, because it makes him look like he's, doing something under the table there. It's freaking me out.
Still is very freely prescribed in America by physicians. Isn't that true?
I have trouble with the word freely.
You'll
Well,
see it.
If a person describes either adult situational reaction or depression or seasonal affective disorder or postpartum depression, what's the first type of antidepressant that's most likely to be prescribed more than any other?
At this point
I'm talking about 1991.
Okay, Prozac was one of them.
And that's the only drug that was ever prescribed to Julie Jensen was Prozac.
During the time she was a patient of ours, yes. I think from what we see in our records, I can say.
When Julie was talking about not wanting to be like her mother, and directing your attention to, I don't know, the note above the July 6, 1990, you'd asked about her background, and she said mother, home, father, AMC, correct?
Correct.
And she expressed the fear or the concern that women who stay home can become brain dead, correct? You see that up there?
Which page are you on now?
I'll show you. Okay.
I recall what you're saying, but I want to be able to see it.
I want you to too. So here's if you can find that page. Mother, home, father, father. July 6, 1990. So we're talking about Julie not wanting to be like her mother. You've got notations here at the top of this page where there's a reference to July 6, 1990, and it says mother, home, correct?
Correct.
Father, AMC, correct?
Correct.
And then beneath that, there's something that you've written here. Women who stay home become brain dead.
Correct.
Now, that's based on what Julie's concern was.
Yes.
So when she's talking about being fearful of being like her mother had become an alcoholic, correct?
Yes.
And Julie had expressed the concern that women who stay home become brain dead.
Yes.
Now, were you aware that Julie was a straight A student in college?
Not to my recollection, no.
Well, there's the jury's seen evidence. She was a straight A student in a nursing program. She was a very, very, very bright young woman. Did you get that impression that she was extremely intelligent?
I thought she was within reasonable, if not above intelligence.
Well, she was extremely intelligent according to her transcript. I mean, I wish I had grades like that in college. Maybe I would have gone to medical school, but she had straight A students as a nursing student when she attended college. That's reflective of a very high level of intelligence, correct?
Yes.
So it's understandable if an extremely intelligent woman is concerned, oh, gee, if I stay at home, I'm not working, women who stay home may become brain dead, correct?
It would be appropriate to a thought that would run through her mind.
Now, is this something that she had about her concern, or was she communicating to you that that's something that Mark said?
I really, I can't say from that question. I can't make an answer on that.
When you look down below, after women who stay home become brain dead, and then you go down below that.
Okay.
Husband, something or other. Can you read what that says?
Husband knows and is glad that. And I can't. Something is something for. And I can't read my writing there.
So I'm now directing your attention to Dr. Newman's notes. Can you find those?
Yes.
Well, I would say, if she's not satisfied in her situation, and I did this the same way with my wife, whenever she's not satisfied in a situation, no matter what it is, say, for example, whenever she decided to go out on her own, start her own law firm, that was something that, she didn't want to do because she was concerned about, losing the amount of income that we were accustomed to. And, for me, I just said, it's not a problem if, this is why we set up our account. So we had money to live off of for however long it takes for your law firm to take off. So take all of it that you need. And within a day, she had it up and running. Literally was off to the races. Hey, Memento, how you doing? Man, me too. My wife doesn't like them, but I love them. Good stuff.
And the benefit of Dr. Newman's notes is that we can read all of them, right?
That is correct.
Even you can read. I mean, I put it like this. Even you can't read some of your notes,
That
correct?
is correct.
But we can all read Dr. Newman's notes.
That is correct.
So, what Julie told Dr. Newman is consistent with what she told you, specifically directing your attention to husband feels she is too involved with child. Correct?
Yes.
That's what Julie told Dr. Newman, and that's what Julie Jensen told you.
Yes.
And then further down, you see this notation, Mark? You see that?
How far down?
It's the right-hand side, about halfway down the page.
Okay. Yes.
Mark represented emotional stability. So she's indicating that Mark represented for her emotional stability, correct?
Yes.
But then below that it says, wants wife not to be brain dead.
Yes.
So it was Mark that was expressing the concern about Julie becoming brain dead. So when you go back to...
Judge, I would ask that the witness be able to answer.
Is that a question or a statement?
So
It was a statement. I would move to strike it.
Go ahead and ask a question.
So looking at that note, it appears that it was Julie was relating that it was Mark who was concerned. He wants a wife not to be brain dead. That was Julie expressing what Mark had indicated, correct?
From the best of my knowledge, reading Dr. Newman's notes, I would say yes.
And so then we can put that in context to this note that I referenced earlier, mother home, father AMC, women who stay home become brain dead. So that sounds like very similar to what what Julie was indicating Mark had expressed that concern when she was talking to Dr. Newman. Isn't that true?
Correct.
Now, the last time you saw her was 1991.
Yes.
You didn't see her in 1992.
Correct.
You didn't see her in 1993. So I'm not going to go through those. Between 1992 and 1998, you did not see Julie Jensen and you did not see Mark Jensen.
Correct.
This happens. Big issue. Oh, the prosecution's horrible on this. Yes.
But even though we haven't seen him since 1991, when you did see Julie in 1990 and 1991, there was no indication that Julie Jensen was suicidal, was there?
That is correct.
Nothing further.
You want to questions? All right. Do we have exhibits over here?
We do. We have. I move
He
exhibit
could have summed that up
101.
in just one
101,
short bit. He didn't need the rest of that.
Just like I put that.
That's it, Mr. DeFazio. Thank you.
Next witness for the defense.
Is a video, Judge.
All right. How short is it?
It's like 46 minutes.
Well, let's start it, and at least we'll get halfway through it. Okay.
Oh, this is going to be horrible. Oh, if it's one of
And is
those
it,
bad
whose
ones.
video is it?
Sergeant Mark Hunter.
And your list is number 12. You start playing it. Let's try to go up to like 5 after 12. Okay.
And it's item number. I have to make it an item. I'm going to say item number 7.
Here we go. Ah.
So just,
If this is bad audio.
Please state your names.
I know.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm going to. I don't know why my computer's so louder. We're all awake now.
Your name for court.
Hunter,
Right, Judge, I'm going to start it now.
Could you please state your name and spell your name for court?
Mark Hunter, M-A-R-K-H-U-N-T-E-R.
Mr. Hunter, how are you
Mark.
employed?
I'm a lieutenant with the
Sir.
Pleasant Prairie Police Department.
How long have you been employed by the Pleasant Prairie Police Department?
23 years.
23 years continuously with Pleasant Prairie?
Yes.
Did you
He
have
doesn't
law
even
enforcement
look
experience
23 years
during your
old.
I had dispatch experience, and I also worked at Silver Lake Police Department for like 8 months,
How long have you been a lieutenant?
since 1999.
At some point, did you have occasion to come in contact with Julie Jensen?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall when your first contact with Julie Jensen was?
I don't recall the exact date, but I know it was in 1991, 92. I had been called down there several times for hang-up phone calls that she was receiving.
And was it Mrs. Jensen herself who was calling you?
Yes.
And what did Mrs. Jensen report to you when did you actually go over to the house or just deal with this by phone?
I dealt with her, yeah, some of it on the phone, some of it at her house, but I remember I had been there in 1991, and she had a phone trace put on her phone, which Wisconsin Bell had put one on, and I don't know that they ever came up with any phone numbers that were calling. And in 1992, on the 8th of January, 1992, I went to her house, and she told me that she had still been receiving hang-up phone calls. She suspected that the phone calls might be coming from Illinois, and Wisconsin Bell said that they could not set up a trace that would capture phone numbers from Illinois that were originating there. And she was getting ready to go out of town, so she wanted her house put on extra patrol. And she told me that she was convinced that she thought that Perry Tariqa had been making these phone calls, but she could not prove it. She told me that about a year or so before she had an affair with him, and she said that she had broken it off and that she had reconciled with her husband, and she felt that Perry was making the phone calls. I told her that I couldn't prove anything, but I did tell her that I would be willing to call Perry Tariqa in a non-accusatory manner and just ask him if he had been making the phone calls, and that if he said no, fine, and if he had been making them, that he would please stop. And she said she asked me to do that.
Okay, let me break that down a little bit. So you indicated that this last conversation in which you discussed the possibility of calling Mr. Tariqa took place on January 8th of 1992.
That's correct.
Do you recall how much earlier it is that Mrs. Jensen first contacted you?
It may have been several days before, and I know that it was like the year before, and I know that there were other officers in the department who had also responded for phone calls.
Okay, and do you know whether the other officers were dealing with a situation that occurred in 1991 or 1992, or are you referring to something that took place a little bit later?
I'm not sure the exact dates that other officers had been there.
Okay, well, let me see exhibits marked here. Lieutenant, let me show you defense exhibits 295 and 296. I'll give you 295 first. And I don't see the name of the responding officer on that. I will tell you, it looks like your handwriting for an incident August 13th, 1991. Do you recognize it as your handwriting?
Yes, I think it got cut off at that bottom because
Cut off on your signature probably would have been on the bottom.
Yeah.
And the August 13th, 1991 report, what does that tell you about the incident? And then why don't I identify the other exhibit here that you're looking at, which is exhibit 296, and that seems to have a date of August 26, 1991. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's also your report?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what was occurring in August of 1991 regarding any reports by Mrs. Jensen?
She said that she and her husband had been receiving pornographic letters in the mail, and they had also been receiving these hang-up phone calls, and that would have been. She had called me 722 of 91. That was a different case number, 915159. And now she was calling again in August 26th or August 13th at 204 saying that the garage door had been opened and that some lawn furniture had been moved around the yard. And she said that neither her or her husband had done it.
And so this is August of 1991.
Correct.
All right. Then the next contact that you said you had was on January 8th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you in fact call Mr. Tariqa?
Yes, I did.
Where was he located?
He worked at Dean Whittier in Illinois.
Julie gave me the phone number to call there. So at about 8:30 in the morning on the 8th of January, I did call and asked for Perry Tarica. And I told him who I was. I told him where I worked. I said that this Julie Jensen had called us and that she didn't know what to do anymore. She was tired of getting hang-up calls. And I said, I'm not accusing you of doing it. If you have been doing it, just knock it off. And if you haven't been doing it, that's fine. And he got real snappy on the phone and he said, who are you with? What's your phone number? And then he said, well, listen here, mister, how dare you call and harass me? And I told him not harassing you. I said, I just wanted to try to bring a closure to this because it had been going on for so long. And he said, I had an affair with her. I respected her wishes not to contact her anymore. I haven't had any contact with her. I'm not going to have any more contact with her. I'm not going to call her. And he was pretty upset on the phone that I would have even called him to ask him about that.
And what was your response? Were you sort of apologetic to him?
I just said, I'm not here to accuse you of anything. If it's been going on, fine. And if it's not, that's fine too. Because it was my hope that if it had been him making phone calls, that perhaps it might cause him to stop calling.
Did he specifically?
So just so you get an idea of what this guy looked like, this Perry Tarica. Just an idea. Of course, this is, over 20 years after, but that's Perry Tarica. Just a thought.
He denied having called her?
He denied calling her. He denied having any contact at all with her.
Denied entirely that you had any contact or tried to contact her?
Correct.
Okay. So was that the end of your investigation?
Well, Julie had gone out of town, I believe, the 10th through the 12th, and she'd asked for extra patrol on the house because of the lawn furniture. And when she got back, I was on duty, and she called the police department, and she was very upset. She said that when she returned from her vacation, her sister Jill Griffin, who lives in Kenosha, had called her up and said, I want you to come over to the house. I believe she went over to the house, or Jill went to their house. I can't recall, but anyway, Jill had received a letter care of Julie Jensen at Jill Griffin's house. And it was from Perry Tarica. And Julie had opened it. It was a Christmas card. There was a rambling letter about how much he cared for her, how much he loved her, wishing her and her new baby and her husband well. There were some like cartoon clippings and some articles about love. And she was very upset by receiving the letter. And I looked at the postmark of the letter and it said January 6th of 1992. And right away, I thought to myself, I talked to him on the 8th and he was adamant that he had not called her, he had not had any contact with her, that he was not going to have any contact with her. When it was mailed on the 6th, he could have easily told me on the phone, hey, by the way, she's going to be receiving a letter in the mail from me that I just sent. And he didn't. Instead, he was very defiant and very upset with me for having called and said that he had no contact in any way, shape, or form with her.
And he had basically gotten angry with you for suggesting that he might contact her.
Correct.
And then you look at this letter and it was postmarked just 2 days before your conversation with him?
That's correct.
Let me see if I can find an exhibit. Lieutenant Hunter, let me show you Exhibit 201. And is the first page of Exhibit 201, is that the a photocopy of the envelope that was received by Ms. Griffin?
Yes.
And actually, let me just put that on the screen. Sure. I can identify it from there. Lieutenant, right behind you there. So this is the envelope that was received that was postmarked just 2 days before this conversation?
Yes, sir.
And over here is the postmark that said January 6th.
That's correct.
And the return address for Mr. Tarica is over in the left-hand corner.
Yes.
And so one of the enclosures is Christmas card that's not photocopied particularly well.
Yes.
And then we have this letter. Was this letter part of what was received?
Yes, sir, it is.
And then is this the inside of that card that we saw?
Yes.
Okay. And then you said there were some clippings and cartoons, right?
Yes.
This is all part of the same package.
That's correct.
And some article that nice guys finish, right?
Yes.
Did this come as quite a surprise to you?
Yes, it
Oh,
What was your response? How did you handle this, Lieutenant?
Well, like I said, Julie was very upset that she had received this card, and she was even convinced more that maybe Perry had been involved in some of the calls. I told her that I'd call him up, and she said, I want something done. I would like to seek a charge of harassment or something against him, because she said, I just can't go on like this. So I called Perry, and I can't recall the exact conversation that I had. If I could see that report.
Yeah, let me give you your report, which is Exhibit 203. You wrote a report on January 13th, 1992?
Yes. That would have been right after she had gotten back from vacation and had called on. I called Perry Tarica at his workplace, and he said that he did send a letter to the care of his sister, and he said that he did not consider the letter to be harassment. He kept saying that harassment would be calling her on the phone, but a letter would not be. And I talked to my chief, and he said that under our local ordinance of harassment, that to go ahead and issue him a citation, which I did. I mailed it to him. He told me that he was still madly in love with Julie, and that he just wanted to express his feelings for her, which is why he wrote the letter. I mailed
Wow.
a citation to him for harassment, and I don't know whatever happened with the case for sure. I do know that after that particular time, when the citation was mailed, that Julie had never called me. I don't know if any other officers had responded, but I had not received any more.
Now, when you spoke with Mr. Tariqa, and it was January 13th, 1992 that you spoke with him?
The 14th,
The
at
14th.
9:30.
Okay. Was it the 13th that Julia spoken with you? I thought I saw the 13th.
I believe it was the 13th. It was whatever day she got back from.
Oof. Dude, give up.
The 13th.
And so
At 9 a.m. is when she called me, and I called Perry that same day at 9:30.
Okay. Now, you indicated that the first time you spoke with Mr. Tariqa, you were pretty non-accusatory and just trying to find out what was going on.
Yes.
Has your tone changed when you called him back?
Yeah, I said, I can't believe this. I said, you were so mad at me for calling. You were adamant that you hadn't. And I said, here's a letter. And his defense right away was, well, that's not harassment. Sending a letter is not harassment. And I told him that she doesn't want any more contact with you. And a phone call previous, on the 8th when I had talked to Perry Tariqa, he had said that he had respected her wishes not to contact her. And so it was just pretty much a surprise.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that Mrs. Jensen, when you first had contact with her, had said that she had an affair with this individual.
Yes.
Do you recall what she had to say about that affair?
She really didn't, that I recall, go into too much detail. She just said that it had happened a year before, or a year and a half before. And then she said that she had broken it off with that and that she had told her husband about it and that they were working through that.
Now, you mentioned something about trying to set up a trace through Wisconsin Bell.
Yes.
They were the local telephone carrier at the time.
Yes.
Something that you had to, were harassing phone calls something that was part of your job duties in 1991 and 1992 that you occasionally had to investigate?
Sure.
And one of the methods by which you try to deal with harassing phone calls might be to put on a phone trace.
Yes.
And did you learn during the course of your duties that you can trace calls to another state?
Yes.
Lieutenant Hunter, were you also present at the Jensen household on the evening that Mrs. Jensen passed away?
Yes, I was.
And what were your duties at the scene?
I was called from home to come there to take photos.
And did you in fact take photographs?
Yes, of the interior of the home.
Any photographs that we have of the interior, those have been taken by you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you make your own decisions as to what to photograph, or was that done at the direction of Detective Ratsberg or someone else?
I was told to, Lieutenant Restream was there, and I was told to go in and just take photos of each room as it was. And that's why I just proceeded through the house.
Do you know what time that you took the photographs?
I don't. I know that I was called at home at about 5 p.m. So I'm thinking of 6:30ish, 7. I would have to double check what time I arrived at the house.
Do you have any reports relating to your activities at the house that night?
Yes, I do.
Damn. Damn. Spacing out here.
That's you have a page and a half narrative of your activities at the scene.
Yes, sir.
And is there any indication in there as to precisely what time photographs were taken?
No, I don't believe so. No, there isn't.
And is there any other document that you're aware of that would tell you when the photographs were taken?
No.
Now, I see from your report that you seized a leather-bound daytimer calendar of Mark Jensen's. Is that correct? And I'm looking at the second page of your narrative report.
Yeah, I don't know that I seized it. I saw the black leather bound day timer, and there are different notations on for dates inside of it.
Okay.
I believe that Lieutenant Reisberg or Sergeant Riley would have collected it if they did collect it.
Well, you reviewed that calendar, correct?
I remember paging through it, and we were, I believe, in the home office area, and Lieutenant Reisberg was there too.
And did you identify that as an item that should be seized in your investigation in this case?
Lieutenant Reisberg was in charge of the scene and any decisions on what to take. I know he took the computer and other things, so I don't know that I personally said we need to take this, but I do remember that there were notations in it.
Okay. And did you alert him to the notations and suggest that it might be important?
I think, I can't remember if Sergeant Riley was standing next to me. We just more or less saw it there and, thought that it might be important to the case in somehow. I mean, we didn't really know at the time what had happened or what value it may have, but
Okay. And this was an item then that you did seize at the time?
yes.
Okay. Lieutenant, just to finish up here, I just you indicated you took photographs at the scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just like you to identify a few photographs here. Look, this is Exhibit 132. Do you recall taking Exhibit 132 at the scene?
Yes.
Okay. I would move, and this is of the computer room,
Yes.
and we can see the computer right over here. I would move Exhibit 132.
No objection.
You also took a photograph of, this is Defense Exhibit 171.
That's right.
And do you recall that was the Jensen bathroom connected to the master bedroom?
Yes,
And we have some Dixie cups here on the counter.
that's correct.
Were you asked to seize those?
I don't recall if those were seized or not.
Okay. I move Exhibit 171 if it hasn't been previously admitted.
No, Your Honor.
Show you Exhibit 172, Lieutenant Hunter. And this is of the kitchen area in the Jensen household.
Yes, sir.
And all these pictures were taken on December 3rd, 1998, correct?
That's correct.
And we have some various glasses on the kitchen counter here.
Yes,
And do you know whether all those glasses were seized?
that I don't recall.
Okay. You don't recall if you did it, or you don't recall doing it?
I don't recall what if I had like an evidence list, but I don't recall actually being like the collector of any evidence.
Okay. Have you had any role in the investigation of this case since December 3rd, 1998?
No.
Let me just put on the screen. This is, whoops.
Breaking
This
out
is
his
exhibit,
Polaroids.
170.
Are these penis
And do
pics?
you recognize that?
Are
That's
they
a table,
penis
bedroom?
pics?
Yes, I do.
And you see that there's a phone there next to the bed?
Yes.
And do you recall whether officers seized those dish items there on the bedside table?
I believe one bowl had macaroni and cheese or something in it, and they did seize that.
Okay. And that's Exhibit 170, which I moved in the event it hasn't already been received.
Rats ate that.
And here's a more close-up view of the items on the bedside table, the phone, blue glass.
Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, folks, and
previously mentioned, correct?
share this around.
I would move 169.
No objection.
Okay, I have two newly marked photographs here, Exhibits 297 and 298. And I'll look at 298 first and invite your attention in particular to that, the lower left-hand portion. Is this a picture again of the kitchen counter at the
Yes.
Jensen home?
Looks like a dishwasher right there.
Okay, and can you see what appears in the lower left-hand corner of 298, what appears to be a Walgreens prescription envelope?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then if you look at 297, does that appear to be a close-up of the Walgreens prescription envelope?
Yes.
And can you read the date and time on that prescription envelope?
December 2, 1998, 11:13 a.m.
At 11:13 a.m. on December 2nd.
That's correct.
And that was the day before Mrs. Jensen's death.
Correct.
And I would move Exhibits 297 and 298.
No, Your Honor.
Wow. The
That's one last
day
thing I'll ask.
before.
About, well, do you know that Pleasant Prairie has a building inspector's office?
Yes, I do.
And they're in charge of issuing building permits.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the documents that are issued in regards to building permits?
No, I know if you might get a fence or sometimes site or something, I'm not sure of all the what it takes to get one.
Okay, you don't have any authority for prosecuting those kind of violations for a building code violation or failure to get a permit or anything like that?
No, the building inspector, just like the fire department, they do have the authority to issue citations if there was non-compliance with someone who got a, or did something did not get one. We would not really have any authority or contact with.
Okay, I have here a certified copy of documents relating to a building permit for a deck at the Jensen home in 1994, which I moved as a certified copy. Any objection?
No objection.
And I know you may not be familiar with this, but maybe coming up here, you see that there's a list of inspections relating to this deck. You see that?
Yes.
And does it appear that there was a final inspection of the deck indicating that it was finished?
It says 10394 passed. I don't know if that would, but it says final. Yes.
Okay, and it looks like it may even say pass. Let me put
Yes,
that on the screen.
What does that have to do with anything?
First, we have a building permit for a deck for the pool, issued on July 8th, 1994. And then we have record of inspections.
Don't
And,
care.
Down here where it says final, October 3rd, 1994, and perhaps that says pass there, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Cross.
Your Honor, since it's new, would this be a good time to stop? Since it was
No, it's a good time to stop.
Yeah, good time to stop.
We're going to go to all the way to 1:30 for your lunch today.
All right. So we finished off the first half. I don't know how this is relevant, but we'll bring it back. I love skipping over this stuff. I can finish up so much in such a little bit of time.
If there had been no other sexually explicit photographs being left, no hang-ups, no furniture being kicked around, and all you had was this one letter, is that something you would normally issue a citation for?
I may have called him up and warned him, but I think that because he had called in the conversation just 2 days before, he had said that he has not called her, has had no contact, has had planned to have no contact with her. I think that's what, and at the time, it certainly fell within, maybe not a state charge, but our local ordinances that we have.
Now, you were shown, I believe, a police report from August of 1991 that you wrote. Do you have
She's
that there?
cute.
What exhibit number is that?
295.
For 91.
At the time that you had this conversation with Mrs. Jensen in August of 1991, did you ask did Mrs. Jensen tell you, well, let me rephrase that. Did Mrs. Jensen tell you that she and her husband had been receiving pornographic letters in the mail and obscene and harassing phone calls at home?
Yes.
And then did you ask to see some of the letters?
Yes, and I have to read through here, but I believe she told me that they had disposed of them or they didn't have them.
And do you recall why you asked to see some of the letters?
Well, if we could get a letter, there's a possibility we could hydrogen spray it and get a fingerprint off of it, or if there had been, I didn't know if there had been any handwriting in it, possibly we could have tried to do something with that.
Okay. So did you tell Mrs. Jensen that you wanted to see some of the letters so that you could try to lift some fingerprints off of them?
Yes.
Did you check back with Mrs. Jensen a few days later to ask her if there had been any more harassing behavior and she said no?
Just read it. On Wednesday, 8/28, 911 came. I called Julie Jensen home and she said that's transferred. Yes, she said that she's had no more calls. And let us know if she does.
Did you also then, you spoke with Mrs. Jensen again in January of 1992, correct?
Yes.
And this is approximately 5 months after this last conversation where you asked her about any letters so that you could lift fingerprints?
Yes.
And at that time, did Mrs. Jensen tell you that her husband was receiving harassing letters at work?
That's what she said, that she'd receive at home and her husband would receive at his workplace.
Referring to harassing or obscene letters, correct?
Harassing phone calls.
Okay. Did she also tell you that her husband had thrown away the obscene letters that he had received at work?
Yes. Next sentence down, I did see that. Yes.
So as a result, she had nothing to give you in order to try to get fingerprints off of them?
Correct.
And that's because her husband was throwing them away?
Correct.
Nothing further.
Lieutenant Hunter, inviting your attention back to the your report of August 26, 1991. Can you give me the exhibit number on that letter, please?
296.
Thank you. Exhibit 296, and I invite your attention to, it's about 7 lines from the bottom, the sentence that begins, I asked. You see that sentence that begins with I asked at the end of the line?
Is it on page 1 or page?
Yes, I think it is on page 1, about 7 lines from the bottom. It's the last 2 words of the line. Begins with I asked.
Oh, yes, I see it.
Okay.
Oh.
What your report indicates is that you asked to see some of the letters so that Lieutenant Wagner tried to lift a fingerprint, and she said, and she referring to Mrs. Jensen, is that right?
That's correct.
She said that she had thrown the letters away. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you thought it would make sense to get a fingerprint from these documents, correct?
Correct.
And were you aware from your contacts in the department that there was some continuing problems that the Jensens had with receiving harassing material after your contacts with them ceased?
Yes.
And were you aware of whether they ever tried to get a fingerprint from this material?
And I'm not sure. I just know that at roll call, we share information about cases. So I'm not sure what was going on with every aspect of those things. But I was aware that it was a continued problem.
Okay. And was that mostly through Officer Cosman? Do you recall?
I believe Officer Cosman, and I can't remember if anyone else had mentioned going down there.
And at this time, do you recall whether Officer Cosman ever indicated that materials actually were turned over, that photographs were turned over to the police by the Jensens?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, well, you have a wonderful. Thank you for
recall being aware that
stopping by.
Collected from the house.
And
but based on what you did in 1991,
have a wonderful evening.
Good police work would have been to get some
Au revoir.
fingerprints from these kind of materials.
Or handwriting, if there was any handwriting on there to match it or compare it, yes.
On August, it looks like the August 26th incident was sort of wrapped up by you. If you go to page 2, it was just 2 days later on August 28th that you called back and provided Mrs. Jensen with the information. Well, she told you that Wisconsin Bell cannot trace calls in another state.
Correct.
And she simply told you at that time that between August 26th and August 28th, they hadn't received any calls. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And during your experience, you've had other occasion to investigate, contacts of a harassing nature.
Yes.
And in some instances, does the harasser try different methods that is sometimes being nice and sometimes being mean?
Yes.
I mean, there's an attempt to win back the person and at the same time to do bad things to the person to punish them for not coming back.
Yes, and I've investigated a number of stalking type cases, and it is that.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
No, Your Honor.
There we go.
Judge, I would move in Exhibit 106, which was previously 203, 108, which was previously 296, 105, which was previously 295, and 107, which was previously 299.
All right, they will be received.
And then, Judge, I would like to show the 2 photos that were shown to the jury, and they're on Exhibit 104, Item 5, and Item 6.
All right, go ahead.
Walgreens. Man, so efficient.
This is Item 6.
Defense is so efficient. Prosecution is so horrible.
And I would move those in with Exhibit 104.
They will be received. Who does the defense wish to call next?
Dr. Richard Borman.
All right. Number 4 on the defendant's amended witness list. If you could remain standing, doctor, raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. You solemnly swear the testimony is meant to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Try to get as close as you can to the microphone, and then spell your first and last name for the reporter.
Richard Borman, Richard J. Borman, B-O-R-M-A-N.
Who's asking the questions?
I am Judge.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Dr. Borman. I'm going to ask you a little bit about your employment or past employment.
Okay.
Can you tell us how you are employed or were employed?
I've been retired since 2010, and I was, the last thing I did, I was employed by Kenosha Hospital Medical Group for about the last year of my practice. When I was taking care of the Jensens, I was in private solo practice.
And were you licensed in the state of Wisconsin?
Yes,
And what was the nature of your private practice?
family practice. So I did everything from taking care of babies to old people in hospital and office and assisted at surgery, a lot of things like that.
And how long did you do that?
So I graduated medical school in 79 and finished my residency in 82. Finished my Air Force time in 86. I've been in Kenosha since 89. I ran a residency program that was based out at Parkside. And then I was in my own private practice from 93 until 2009, and then worked for the hospital group for the last year, retiring in 2010.
And were you board certified as a family practice doctor?
Yes.
Have you ever done any teaching in your career?
Okay.
The Air Force, I've been a medical student.
Get through
Yes.
some of this.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about if you remember how Julie Jensen became a patient of yours.
Right. So when I went into my private practice, part of what I did is assume the practice of Dr. Fred Wood, who was an internist in town for many years, and he took care of the family before I did. And so as part of my practice, I took over his patients, many of his patients, and hired his staff. I also brought my own patients from my previous practice out at Parkside as well.
And did you treat anyone else in the Jensen family?
Everybody, Mark and the boys and parents. And yes.
So you were their family doctor?
Right.
Now, I want to talk to you just briefly about whether you treated David Jensen.
I did.
And you had testified that you had also treated Douglas Jensen.
Right.
And were Julie and Mark Jensen and the boys patients of yours through December of 1998?
Yes, they were.
And did Mark Jensen and the boys continue to see you after Ms. Jensen's passing?
For a while. Yeah, I think they transferred in about 2000.
Based upon your experience with the Jensen family, can you tell us who handled like the medical issues with the Jensen family, if you remember?
Well, sometimes Julie would call for Mark. Occasionally, Mark would call for Julie. They'd make each other's appointments. Julie would call and have prescriptions refilled, that sort of thing, time to time.
Would she also make appointments for the boys?
Yes.
And was she the primary person that brought the boys to your office prior to January of 1999?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I think so.
Now, can you tell us if you remember in 1997 to 1998 whether David Jensen had some health problems?
Yeah, he had a kind of recurring cough, which was kind of a nuisance, and it sort of defied diagnosis and seemed to be a tic of some sort. And I saw him several times for that, and actually sought some reinforcement from the specialist at Children's Hospital.
Do you remember when you started seeing David Jensen, what year it was for these coughing or this tics?
I don't.
If you look at the document in front of you, which I marked, what exhibit did I tell you, sir? 99? And you look at that September of 97, can you tell in your notes, which I cannot read, whether you spoke about David Jensen at Ms. Jensen's internal physical?
Let's see. I didn't really say anything about his health at that point.
At some point, you started to see David Jensen for these tics or this cough?
I don't have those records in front of me, but I did see him on several occasions. Yeah.
And you were trying to figure out what was going on with him. Is that fair to say?
Right.
At first, you thought it could be like Tourette's.
Objection, counsel's a leading witness.
Why don't you just rephrase it?
At first, did you consider anything that could be causing like the coughing and the tics?
Well, the usual things, cold, sinus, reflux, something like that, reactive airway disease.
And did you send him to specialists or did you have him sent to other doctors to see or rule out any of those things?
Again, I don't have the records. We talked about that. I don't know that the appointments were ever made. I suggested a couple of options, and they were thinking about it.
If I showed you your testimony from 2008, would that help refresh your memory?
Sure.
Page 9.
Oh, 19.
This document and ask you to read from page 9, starting on line 19.
Okay.
Line 9, and let me know if that refreshes your memory.
Sure. Right. So I guess I did send him to an ear, nose, and throat specialist and an allergist as well.
Do you remember at any point setting up a neurology appointment for Mr. David Jensen?
We talked about that, but I don't know that that happened.
At some point after December of 1998, did you continue to treat David Jensen?
He was still in the practice. I don't know if I saw him, but I did hear that his cough went away.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the treatment records that are in front of you as it relates to Julie Jensen. And these are the records, I think, of the last 4 pages of her treatment file. Would that be fair to say mid-1997 to December of 1998?
Right.
Ooh.
I'm going to actually ask you to begin with page 3, I believe it is, and it's the
So
September 21st.
I wonder, was she poisoning him?
Yeah.
And can you tell from your
And it
notes what that
backfired
visit
on her?
was with Ms. Jensen?
I'm sorry.
Can you tell from your notes what the purpose of that visit was?
Right. So that was an interval exam and annual physical.
And what do you mean by interval exam and annual physical?
So the adults in my practice, we'd like to see at least once a year to kind of pull everything together, what kind of interval history they'd had, emphasize some of the preventive medicine things, and take care of whatever problems might need to be handled.
And can you tell us what her weight was by your records?
Yeah, 123 and a half,
And her height?
5'6",
Does it indicate whether she had any allergies?
unknown.
And whether she was taking any medications on September 21st of 1998?
Multiple vitamins, calcium, and Clearasil topically.
When you look at your notes over on the side, does it indicate what you discussed with Ms. Jensen at this interval exam?
Yes.
And can you tell us what some of those notes say?
So we talked about David's tics, and I put that in quotes because it was still kind of undetermined.
And that was on that September 21st visit?
That was the first thing we talked about.
Okay.
Mhm. And then we had talked about her family history of depression.
Do you know why you talked about Ms. Jensen's family history of depression?
I don't remember the details at this point.
Next thing?
Yeah, we talked about she had a tubal ligation from Dr. Snyder, and that her menstrual period had been regular, and that she seemed to have a little bit premenstrual syndrome at present.
All right. And then is there a part where you talk about past family and social history?
Yeah, she was volunteering at school. At home was Mark and the 2 boys. No smoking, occasional alcohol. She had concerns because her mom was alcoholic, and she was especially careful. She didn't want to proceed down that path.
And that's something she discussed with you on that September 21st?
Yes.
Okay.
Admitted to about a cup of coffee a day and no other drug use.
Did she mention whether she was tired?
Yeah.
What does that say?
Right. So she was tired, and in the past, she'd had an episode of depression and taken Prozac for a time.
And did she make any indication about the being tired as it related to that past treatment?
I don't remember that.
And then what is your next note?
She wore reading glasses, hearing is okay, up to date with the dentist. And I mentioned that her father had died of lung cancer in his 70s.
And at some point, did you start talking with Ms. Jensen about depression?
And I don't remember. There were other elements of our visit. I did an exam. We talked about some other health maintenance type things.
Is there a reason why the discussion of Prozac and prior counseling would have come up?
Yeah, we were talking about her family history of depression. I guess I asked her if, I don't remember, if she'd had a previous history.
And do you remember if you felt that she was depressed on September 21st of 1998?
Objection, counsel leading the witness. Rephrase it.
I didn't imply the answer. I asked if he...
Can you just rephrase
I'll
it?
try.
We'll move on.
I'll try.
Thank you.
At the end of the visit, did you have an opinion as to whether Ms. Jensen was depressed?
Yeah, one of the diagnoses was mild depression, and I put down counsel. We talked. With her previous history, she was tired. She was definitely stressed and concerned about David's tics, and then having what I thought was some premenstrual symptoms and maybe perimenopause stuff. We talked about all of that.
So I think you said it said something about, did you say depressed and counseled?
Right. That was a diagnosis, mild depression, and then I counseled. We discussed that.
So when you say counseled, are you saying that you referred her to counseling or you counseled her?
I did at that point.
And is that something you generally did with your patients in general practice?
Frequently.
Did you have any training as it related to counseling someone for mild depression?
That's part of family medicine training. That's part of my residency, and lots of experience over the years. In the kind of practice that I did, people often have psychological issues that they would bring. And oftentimes they'd be oh, by the way, kind of going out the door, and it turned out that was the most important part of the visit. So yeah, considerable experience.
And as it related to Ms. Jensen, you counseled her on that day as it related to the mild depression?
Yes.
The next note on Ms. Jensen's record, I think, is from September 25th of 1998.
Yes.
And can you tell us what that is for?
So that was a phone call, and she wanted a refill on Cataflam, which is an anti-inflammatory, and we were changing it to a different pharmacy.
Does it say what the change in pharmacy was?
Pardon me?
Does it say what the change in pharmacy was?
Right. So from, let's see, it was done at Walgreens in August, then she wanted it at Good Value, and so we called it into the Good Value pharmacy.
And Doctor, would it be fair to say that the next couple of entries in Ms. Jensen's patient file have to do with this medication?
Correct.
This Cataflam and the generics?
Right. And then as happens oftentimes, so insurance coverage, we needed to change it to a different medicine, which we did. And then I think it eventually got filled. And I think she took that for headaches from time to time.
I'm going to take you to the next page and refer you to the notes on December 1st, 1998.
Right.
Can you tell me what this visit was for?
Yeah, this one, it's on Tuesday, December 1st, 1998. And it was at the end of the morning. We worked her in. Because it seemed like she needed to be seen. And you want me to go through my note here?
Not quite yet, but I will.
Hmm.
Do you remember if she was with anyone when she came to see you?
I think she was alone.
And then on your note, can you tell us what the first part of the note reads?
Right. She was miserable and depressed and decreased appetite, having some diarrhea, talking about marital problems. She specifically denied being suicidal or homicidal and denied any domestic violence that anybody was doing to her. Again, we discussed her strong family history and then her past history of Prozac and some counseling.
So I want to break that down a little bit for you. On the left-hand side, there are also notes as it relates to Miss Jensen, right?
Pardon me?
On the left-hand side, probably in a little bit better penmanship, there are some notes relating to Miss Jensen.
Right.
And that's the December 1st, 98 office visit, correct?
You just translated some of my my writing, but yeah.
And what does the first part of that say?
I think I just said it, but
No, I mean the part that you can read a little bit better.
oh, the reason she was there was discuss a personal matter.
And then did it have her weight at that point?
Yes, 115, which is
And-
8.5 pounds less than she was 3 months ago.
Wow.
Does it also talk about allergies?
Still said unknown.
And what about medications at that point?
None.
So then we went into your handwriting, which you read to us, and you
That
said
was my
that.
nurse's handwriting, by the way. Excellent. Very, very good. Yep.
And in your handwriting, can you read to us again what it said?
Right.
Just the first couple of lines, please.
Right. I remember that clearly. She was miserable, depressed, decreased appetite and some diarrhea, and then concerned about marital problems, not suicidal or homicidal, denied any domestic violence. And then we talked about the strong family history, depression, and her previous history with Prozac for a time.
When you wrote down that she was miserable and depressed, do you know if that's what she said to you, or is that that was your impression?
Probably a little of both.
And when she talked about decreased appetite, is that something that she said to you?
I probably elicited that by asking her questions.
And did you ask her questions because of the miserable
Well,
and
I
depressed?
noticed, right. I noticed her weight was down. That's concerning. That amount she was thin to begin with. And I mean, she looked depressed. And those are some of the things that we talk about with depression. And so I was kind of covering some of those bases just to kind of flesh things out a bit.
So were you trying to find out what potential symptoms there could be?
Right.
And one of those was decreased appetite that she told you?
Yes.
Now, you said that you wrote a note of marital problems. Do you remember what she told you?
That I don't.
Mm.
If I showed you your testimony from 2008, do you think that would refresh your recollection?
Sure. What page, Hazel?
25.
Thank you.
So some things he remembers, other things he doesn't. Mm. Mm.
15 through 17
Mm.
and 20 through 25, and let me know if that refreshes your recollection.
Right. Okay.
That refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Did she describe what she meant by marital problems?
Right. That she'd had a brief affair in the past, and that Mark had never really forgiven her for that. She was worried that she was losing her marriage, and her kids meant everything to her.
And did she tell you she didn't want to lose her kids?
Yes.
Now, you also testified that you asked about domestic violence.
Yes.
And when you say domestic violence, what specifically do you explain to your patient as to what domestic violence means?
Well, a lot of different areas in that, but in particular, she didn't mention anything about worried that somebody was trying to kill her, that there was any physical violence, that they were anybody keeping her hostage in the house, taking her money, anything like that.
So when you say taking her money, is that like financial domestic violence?
Right.
And she didn't say anything about that?
Nothing.
And why do you talk to women who appear to be depressed about domestic violence?
Pardon me?
Is there a reason that you talk to women who appear to be depressed about domestic violence?
Sure. It's a common problem, unfortunately. And a lot of times it's not something that the lady might bring up spontaneously, especially when there's some emotional or psychological issue that has to be something that you think about.
At some point, did you discuss medication with Ms. Jensen?
Yes.
And what was decided at that point?
So I talked with her. She was distraught. She was in tears. And we discussed some options and thought that at least a short-term go with an antidepressant would be indicated. I had, back when we had sample closets, I had some Paxil in the closet, and I gave her several, and tried to refer her for counseling, and encourage her to come back and see me in 2 weeks, if not sooner. And we tried to help her set up an appointment, but she decided not to do that at that time.
So, Dr.
Wow.
In 1990, did you see a stigma with someone being diagnosed with mental health issues?
I did mention that, and I think that's still the case. There's a shortage really of mental health professionals, and a lot of the mental health is done by primary care providers, physicians, family practice. Sometimes it's difficult to get in. Person happens to be in my office, it's something that we can do right then and there. Versus, if I had just said, okay, well, we're going to send you to see a psychiatrist, maybe it's a month, 6 weeks later before they get in. So we address that and start what I thought was appropriate treatment right then.
And you
Nice.
testified that you referred her for counseling?
Suggested that she do that, and we were going to help her make an appointment, but she declined at that time.
Did you ask her to come back and see you at some point?
2 weeks.
And did she schedule an appointment when she left that you know?
I don't know.
Is there any note about an appointment on your?
No. I'll specifically say though, she didn't act drunk at the time that I saw her. She was tearful, but she was clear and appropriate.
She didn't appear to be intoxicated.
Not
That's
at
what you're saying? Okay. You said that you asked her if she was suicidal or homicidal.
Yes.
And what was her response?
No. Definitely not. I mean, she loved her boys and she would do nothing to hurt them, and they meant everything to her.
And as someone who had practiced and also counseled in mental illness cases, is it fair to say that suicides are hard to predict?
Correct.
And would it also be fair to say that suicides brings somewhat of a stigma to an individual?
For sure.
Could someone be hospitalized if they were suicidal?
Oftentimes. Yep.
Could someone be committed to like a mental health institution if they were suicidal?
Objection. These are irrelevant hypothetical questions.
We'll let you ask the last question and we'll go to the next area.
Thank you, Judge. Could someone be committed in a mental health hospital if they were suicidal?
Yeah, there's an emergency commitment procedure to give at least 72 hours to sort that out.
The other thing that you talked about when you were going through your treatment notes is a strong family history. Is that something you talked to her about?
Yeah, but I don't remember the details on that one either.
Is there anything in your notes besides strong family history?
Actually, I think in a previous note, her mother had problems with alcohol and had a tragic death. I don't remember other details.
If I showed you
So
your prior
sad.
testimony, would that help refresh your memory?
Sure.
If you are depressed and suicidal, reach out, contact somebody.
This is already testified in manners precisely.
Because
This
there's
is what's contained in
so
the-
much to
refresh it,
life.
Go ahead.
So
It's
much
already
to
testified
life.
exactly the same way. What's that here? It doesn't need to memory refresh.
I don't know. I don't have the transcript in front of me, but let's see if it helps them.
I'm going to ask you to review line 15.
The doors that will open for you, if you're willing to let those doors open, they will. They really will.
Doctor, does that help refresh your recollection as to what Ms. Jensen and you talked about as related to strong family history?
That's,
And what did she tell you?
she was concerned about her mom's course, and she didn't want to go down that same path, and didn't want to be labeled as crazy, and didn't want to lose her kids.
And that's something she discussed with you?
Yes.
Now, the next part of your notes, I think, is considered maybe the objective part, which you see from Ms. Jensen. Do you say that in your notes? Oh,
I'm sorry.
do you see in your notes where it says oh, and it's the objective part of your notes?
Objection. Counsel leading the witness.
Yeah, I do.
Ask the next question.
And can you tell us if there's any notes there about what you saw as related to Ms. Jensen versus what she told you?
Right. She was in tears, and then I put down we counseled for 15 plus minutes.
Did you see her crying?
Yes.
Now, you had been treating Ms. Jensen for a number of years.
Yes.
Had you ever seen her in this state before?
Never.
And can you tell this jury how you would describe her demeanor on December 1st?
She looked depressed and distraught.
We talked about what your plan was for her already, so I'm going to skip past that. And what was your diagnosis of Ms. Jensen on December 1st of 1998?
Depression, anxiety, and marital problems.
I'm going to take you to your next note, which is December 2nd of 1998. Do you see that there?
I do.
Can you tell us what happened on December 2nd of 1998?
Right. So that was the next day after I'd seen Julie and given her a few samples of Paxil. Mark appeared at the window of my office about the same time of day. And he was concerned. He'd had some information from the internet about side effects from Paxil.
Objection. Objection. This calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Judge, it's 90803 sub 6, which we discussed previously as a business record exception.
Coming to that exception. Let's go.
Thank you. Can you finish what you were saying, Doctor, as to the note from December 2nd?
Yeah, he was concerned that Julie was not sleeping. And we asked, she still hadn't set up any counseling. Thought that if she could get some sleep, she might feel better. So I gave him a prescription for her of a few Ambien and strongly reinforced a follow-up either with me or a psychiatrist, psychologist, and that to the emergency room if worse. And then suggested that they reduce the Paxil by half for a few days.
Did he talk to you about, I think you were saying something about side
Not
effects
bad.
for taking the Paxil. Did he describe that to you?
I think he was concerned about her, that she wasn't sleeping and thought that if she got a little sleep, she might feel better.
I want to take you back just a couple of other entries as are related to Miss Jensen. On the first page, there's an entry from June 19th of 1998. Should be the first page of Exhibit 99 at the bottom, June
Right.
19th, 1998.
Okay.
And can you tell us what that note is about?
Phone call, had a sinus headache, wheezy, chest congestion, no fever. She was seen in the ER on the 14th of June, diagnosed with a sinus infection, bronchitis. They gave her Z-Pak. She finished it, and she was taking some Duravent. And I thought she had some reactive airway disease and gave her a prescription for a Medrol dose pack and a Max Air inhaler. So some anti-inflammatories and a bronchodilator.
And was that prescription based upon you seeing her or just a conversation you had with her? If you
Actually,
remember?
I discussed that with my staff. She called, talked to one of my staff, and then I saw the note, and that's what I suggested they do. And then they called in that prescription. So I didn't actually talk to her about that one.
The next entry on the next page is June 22nd of 1998. It looks like 9:30.
Right.
And can you tell us what that contact with Miss Jensen was?
So that was another phone call, and she called about David that time. His cough had recurred. The last one had lasted 3 months, and he was well, and then now with the same problem. And my staff recommended either Aurora walk-in clinic or the emergency room if necessary. And of course, I'd be happy to see him in follow-up.
And then the next visit, it looks like, was August 12th of 1998.
Right, another phone call, and that one was from Julie, and question about bronchitis. She was coughing for a week, green stuff coming up now, using the Max Air and the OTC expectorant. Coughing problem at night, chest tightness, throat dry, and I gave her a Z-Pak, which is an antibiotic, and then suggested either an appointment with me or emergency room, depending on how she did.
Do you know if she ended up going to the emergency room after that?
I don't have a record of that.
And then we already talked about the ones on the next page. Dr. Borman, when you look at these last 4 pages of your visits with Miss Jensen, do you see any visits from November of 1998?
No.
Did you receive any calls from Ms. Jensen in November of 1998 about any illness?
No.
Illness?
No, I didn't.
And Doctor, the last note as it relates to Ms. Jensen's medical record which I have lost, is from December 7th of
Come on.
1998. Is that right, the last
That's
page?
right.
And that wasn't a meeting with Ms. Jensen. She had passed away by then. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And can you just tell us who that was with?
So that was a phone call with Roger Johnson, the medical examiner. And I don't remember if I called him or he called me, but that was after her death. We discussed her untimely death, and he said that the toxicology and tissue tests were pending. The initial autopsy was unrevealing. I told him I was a little curious. I was not notified or questioned. I found out about her death by reading her obituary in the paper on Saturday, the 5th of December. Again, I'd seen her the 1st, Mark was there on the 2nd, and I didn't see anything until the obit in the paper on the 5th. I paid my respects at the funeral home and saw Mark there. He had said that she wouldn't get out of bed. Her breathing seemed heavy, then changed and possibly congested. She repeatedly claimed to be okay and declined any medical care, either with me or the emergency room. Then he returned home at some point and found her dead. She had not taken extra pills. That was my first concern, that she took all my pills. Even if she had, that wasn't enough to do her in. And then the medical examiner said he'll call if they needed any further information or when the results were available.
After you spoke to the medical examiner, did you speak to anyone in law enforcement?
Subsequent to that, I did. Yeah.
Would that have been January 14th of 1999?
Sergeant Rasberg, yeah.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 98.
Uh-huh. Man,
Dr. Borman, do you recognize that document?
Fenton's doing a good job
Is
so
that a letter written
far.
by Detective Rasberg or written by you?
By me, to Detective
Come
Rasberg.
on.
Is it on your clinic letterhead?
It is.
And in that letter, did you write about your observations and your meetings with the Jensens on December 1st and December 2nd?
I did. I summarized the visits that we had talked about and those last couple of interactions that I had.
Did you also talk about your meeting with Roger Johnson or your telephone call with Roger Johnson?
I did.
And did you also write in there about your appointment with Mark and the boys on December 14th?
I did. Yep.
So I'm going to go back to your treatment of the Jensens. Do you remember Ms. Jensen contacting your office to talk about any medical issues as it related to Mark Jensen?
I reviewed my notes, and there were a series of phone calls over the years where she called for either an appointment or a prescription refill.
And do you remember what prescriptions Mr. Jensen had in the fall of 1998?
Not offhand.
If I showed you a copy of your previous testimony, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
If I can find it. That refreshes your memory?
Yep. Right. So, okay. So we called in a prescription for Zyban for smoking cessation for Mark, and then Nicotrol, which is another nicotine replacement.
Yeah.
Doctor, do you know if Zyban is used for anything other than to help someone stop smoking?
It's an antidepressant.
You had testified that you had gone to Julie Jensen's wake
I did.
and you had had a conversation with Mr. Jensen.
I did.
Did he seem appropriately upset to you?
He did.
Dr. Borman, when you saw Ms. Jensen either in September or December of 1998, did at any point she tell you that she was afraid of her husband?
Never.
Did she mention that her decrease in appetite was because she wasn't drinking or eating anything her husband gave to her?
Didn't.
Did she mention anything about being afraid of being poisoned?
Did not.
Thank you, doctor. I don't have any other questions.
I take it, Mr. Jamboys, you're doing the cross?
I am, Ron.
Go ahead.
Oh, of course. Because
So
he's
Dr.
going to
Borman,
bring up a bunch of
When Julie
stuff
Jensen
that
spoke
doesn't
to you on
matter.
December 1st, 1998, she didn't tell you that she had seen that her husband was looking up things on the internet about how to kill her?
Did not.
She didn't mention that she'd seen all these poisoning sites?
Did not.
She didn't tell you that she thought her husband had previously tried to poison her?
No.
She didn't tell you that her husband repeatedly was pushing her to go see a doctor, did she?
No, she didn't.
And you have no idea as to why Mr. Jensen would be seeking to get his wife to go see a doctor, did you?
No.
Would it surprise you to learn that, well, within 3 days of Julie seeing you, she was dead, right?
That surprised me a lot. Yeah.
And so if Mark Jensen was trying to get his wife to drink things and she was resistant to doing so, would one way possibly to get her to consume something would be to have her doctor prescribe medication for her?
I don't understand that question.
Oh, okay, well, if Mark Jensen was trying to get Julie to say drink wine or drink juice and she was refusing to do it, let's assume from what that happened before December 1st, 1998. He was trying to get her to drink something and she wouldn't do it. Can you assume from what that happened?
We didn't discuss that.
Okay. Now, if Mark Jensen, however, was having that problem, getting her to drink juice, do you think that one way maybe he could get her to drink some juice is to have her take some medication from the doctor, prescribed by the doctor, and then drink some juice to get the medication down? Would that be one way to get her to possibly drink something that she otherwise would not consume?
So he's asking me for an opinion?
Yes, I'm asking for an opinion.
You can face the attorney. If there's an objection, we'll let you know. Okay.
Okay.
Did you understand the question, sir?
I hadn't thought about that.
Well, would it surprise you to learn that Mark Jensen had thought about that?
Objection, Judge, speculation.
No, there's actually evidence of it, Your Honor. The jury's heard evidence of it.
Ask the question.
Okay, would it surprise you to hear, or to know that this jury has heard evidence that Mark Jensen thought that one way to get his wife to drink the stuff he was trying to get her to drink, would be to get her to go to the doctor? Would it surprise you to hear that?
Yes.
Would it surprise you to hear that the reason that Mark Jensen went to see you on December 2nd was to get medication to get Julie to sleep? I mean, you heard that. That's what Mark told you,
That's why I
right?
thought he was there. Yeah.
In fact, you indicated he was concerned that she was not sleeping.
Correct.
That's what he told you. But at the time that he told you that, you were looking at that from the perspective of a family physician, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience as a family physician, when a husband comes to tell you, I'm worried that my wife is not sleeping, you infer from that that the husband is actually has his wife's best interest at heart, right? Right. Because so you, the physician, and he, the husband, all have one interest in mind, and that's the welfare of Julie Jensen, right?
That's what I thought.
That's what you thought. Now, what if this jury had heard evidence that the reason that Mark Jensen was concerned about Julie Jensen not sleeping was because she was manifesting symptoms of antifreeze poisoning at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was upset about that, and he wanted her to sleep through the effects of antifreeze poisoning. Now, what if the jury had heard evidence to that effect? If you had heard information to that effect, you would not have prescribed Ambien in this case, would you?
Judge, I would object this to speculation and argumentative, and
It's a hypothetical question, Your Honor.
to a lay witness.
Take it one step at a time, Mr. Jones.
Okay. Mark
Yeah.
Jensen had told you, I'm trying to poison my wife with antifreeze, and she just won't die. She's acting drunk, and then she's asking me questions about it, and I just wanted to sleep through it. If he had told you that, you wouldn't have given him Ambien, would you?
Well, he didn't tell me that. And if he had told me that, I certainly wouldn't do it.
You
I
would
probably would have called the police about
would
that.
have called the
sure,
police.
Yeah.
So Mark Jensen, if in fact his purpose was to get the Ambien so his wife would sleep through the side effects of antifreeze poisoning, if in fact that was his purpose, he couldn't relate that to you, could he?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled. Go ahead.
A lot of ifs there. That wasn't what I saw.
That wasn't what he told you.
Correct.
I mean, in terms of, that's a good point, Doctor. And I hope you don't get the impression that I'm going after you here. I mean, you were a
You
family
are.
physician. You were deeply concerned about the welfare of your patients.
Correct.
You loved your job and you served your
You
community in
are
that capacity. You did so
totally
honorably. For that
speculating
reason, we're
here.
concerned for your patients. And
Jesus.
by the way, I didn't say this, so I want to thank you for the service to your country in the Air Force. And I want to thank you for your service to the people in
Oh,
this community
Jesus.
as a family physician. That's honorable.
This
and
does
important
not
work.
make you
And I don't
look
want to give you the
good,
impression that I'm in any
Jensen,
way
our
demeaning you at all
prosecutor.
for what you've done.
Jam
think-
boys.
You're going to get one. I just don't want him to get the impression that I'm going after him.
Ask the question.
So,
You
so
are,
Doctor,
though.
you only have a certain amount of time to spend with each one of your patients, right?
That's right.
Because you got a very busy practice.
Right.
And so you're trying to get as much information from your patients as quickly as you could so that you could see to their needs and then move on to the next patient, right? And so, for example, when you were interviewing Julie on December 1st, 1998, you employed this, what was it called, the SIGE caps? It's SIGE, SIGECAPS. That's an acronym, correct? SIGE caps?
It's a mnemonic
Mnemonic, okay.
for depression. Right.
Okay, and so we'll go through the alphabet one by one here. So the letters for SIGE caps. One is the S is for sleep problems, correct?
Correct.
So when you're going through SIGE caps with your patient, you're doing this as quickly as you can. So the first thing you ask about is sleep problems, correct?
Sometimes, not all the time. Yeah.
Well, isn't that what SIGE caps means? This is your shorthand process for assessing somebody for depression.
I didn't put that in my note from that visit.
But that's what you employed, correct? SIGE caps.
Well, that's one of the things that I do. Right.
And when you interviewed Julie Jensen on December 1st, 1998, she didn't make any reference to any sleep problems, did she?
No.
And then the next thing, the I stands for interest, correct?
Correct.
And then the next thing is G, and that stands for guilt, correct?
Correct.
And then the next thing is E, and that stands for energy, correct?
Correct.
And the next thing is C, that stands for concentration, correct?
Correct.
And the next thing is appetite, and that stands for appetite. I mean, A, that stands for appetite, correct?
Correct.
And then psychosocial retardation, that's the P stands for that, correct?
Right.
And then the final thing is S, and that stands for suicidality, correct?
That's right.
And so when you went through the SIGE caps thing, that's what you do with your patients when you're assessing for depression, correct?
Correct.
And she had no sleep problems, correct?
I don't remember if we talked about sleep.
But you didn't make any notations that she had sleep problems on December 1st, 1998, did you?
I didn't.
And if she had mentioned to you that she had sleep problems, that's significant. That's something you would have written in your report, isn't it? Or in your notes, correct?
Wouldn't have changed what I did at all or my impression.
I understand, Doctor. Please understand. I'm not trying to criticize even your notes, although I can't read them, but nobody can read my notes either. So we have that in common. But if she had told you that she had sleep problems, you almost certainly would have made a notation of that, don't you think? That's a significant thing.
He is
Well,
getting
right.
pissed.
There's only so much. I mean, it's limited. It's not a word for word transcription of the visit that we do.
I understand that. I mean, you're
In
busy.
fact, I worked her in at the end of the morning because I thought she had something that really needed to be addressed.
Yes. And during the course of that interview with her,
He's
she referred to marital
ignoring
problems,
the
she alluded to an
answer.
affair that she had in the past and felt that Mark had never really forgiven her for that. That's what she told you, correct?
Correct.
But she didn't tell you that during all the time that you treated her, she didn't tell you that she'd been the object or the subject of a years-long pattern of sadistic.
Judge, I'd object this to argumentative. It's the language.
Yes.
Well, why don't you tell the sadistic information that you're trying to ask
Okay.
about?
Well, let's put this way. She didn't tell you that somebody had engaged in a pattern of repeated hang-up calls and leaving pornographic photos around the house and allegedly leaving pornographic photos at her husband's place of business. She never told you that, did she?
Never did.
Would you agree that if somebody, I mean, it goes on for years. So let's take a look at Julie's notes concerning this. Did you know that Julie kept a log of the harassment that she was subjected to for years and years and years?
Judge, I again would object as to Julie being subjected to. All of the testimony is that the calls were to the Jensen's home and that the photos were left at the Jensen home, including Mr. Jensen's vehicle.
That's your interpretation.
I
We'll
think
let the
that's-
jury make their own interpretation.
I agree
We
with
all
that.
have our jobs here. Let the jury do their job.
But
So
I-
the question will be allowed.
So Doctor, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to show you something, and I'm going to ask you if Julie ever talked to you about this, or she ever showed this to you. It starts on page 32 of this document, in the upper left-hand corner, then through.
Leave out words like sadistic and gosh. Defense needs to like just start objecting
So
more.
log starting January 19th, 1992.
Object
Hang up all
more.
calls, and then
He's going to do this crap again.
pornographic photos being left around the house, and Julie didn't know who was doing this. That would
This has nothing
embarrass
to
Julie again and again.
do with
That
him.
yes, that would be. I mean, if it was intended to humiliate and demean and embarrass Julie again and again and again from 1992 all the way through August of 1998. That reflects a high level of a sadistic intent on the part of.
Objection.
So this kind of psychological abuse that Julie was experiencing at anybody's hand, Julie hadn't told you about this during the time that she was your patient.
Right.
Now, do you have an independent recollection of Julie now as you sit here today?
I'm sorry.
Do you remember Julie? Do you remember what she was like? Do you remember anything about Julie?
Well, I saw her a number of times through the years in my office, right?
That's an evasive question. I mean, answer. He's searching. He can't find anything.
I'm going to direct your attention to the television screen, Doctor.
Pardon me?
I'm going to direct your attention to the television screen. I think that's the easiest one for you to see. And Douglas.
Yes.
To the treatment that Julie received on June 19th, 1998 of your notes. Actually, let's start with September 29th, 1997. Do you have to see that part of your notes, sir?
I do.
And on September 29th, 1997, you got her name, her telephone number, and then URI. And what is that? That stands for upper respiratory tract infection. Has gone into chest, PND plugged.
Postnasal discharge.
Yeah. Weight on chest. Now, tell me, doctor, and then on June 19th, 1998, sinus headache, wheezy, chest congestion, correct?
Correct.
No fever, sinus infection, and bronchitis. Now, tell me this, doctor. You also knew that Mark Jensen was a heavy smoker, correct?
I did.
And did Julie complain to you that he would smoke in the house and she couldn't get him to stop smoking in the house?
I don't remember talking about that.
Well, if in fact Mark Jensen is a heavy smoker and he smokes cigars and cigarettes and he smoked them in the house, might that count for the continuing cough that David was experiencing?
Could contribute.
That would certainly be an exacerbating factor, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Objection on speculation of him smoking in the house.
So you traded Julie Jensen for years, is that true?
From 93 until her death.
And she complained about some measure of depression on September 21st, 1998. Is that true? Is that true?
True.
She never complained about depression in any of the years before that.
Not while I was taking care of her.
And then she complained about on December 1st, 1998. She said she was depressed and she said there were marital problems, correct?
Correct.
But she didn't tell you what all the marital problems were, did she?
Right.
She didn't tell you that her husband, Mark Jensen, that she suspected he was having an affair with another woman.
Don't remember.
She didn't tell you that part of the marital problems was she suspected her husband was trying to poison her.
She definitely didn't tell me that.
She didn't tell you that she suspected that her husband was going on all these business trips so he could be away with his lover.
Did not.
And when you talked to Mark Jensen on December 2nd, 1998, he didn't tell you anything about his girlfriend on the side, did he?
Did not.
Oh, come on now. There he's a horrible prosecutor.
So on November 20th, was it November 25th that Julie had contacted you about trying to get an appointment for a specialist for David?
Correct.
Did Julie tell you that the reason she was able to do that is because Mark finally gave her permission to talk to you about having David see a specialist?
Did not.
Now, when you prescribed the Ambien, when you gave the Ambien to Mark Jensen, you didn't tell him to give her Ambien as soon as he got home that day, did you?
Did not.
Were you aware that's what he did? As soon as he got home, he gave her Ambien?
Objection assumes a fact, not in evidence.
Overruled. Go ahead.
It's in the interview, Your Honor.
Overruled.
So, were you aware that as soon as he got home, he gave her some Ambien?
Didn't know that.
Were you aware that he gave her another dose of Ambien that night?
Did not know that.
Did you know that as soon as she woke up the next morning, he gave her another dose of Ambien?
Didn't know that either.
On the morning of December 3rd, and throughout the night of December 3rd, 1998, the early morning hours of December 3rd, 1998, were you aware that Julie was laying in bed, unconscious, and breathing like this?
heavily.
Oh,
Did you ask him
come
at
on.
that funeral? Well, gee, Mark, I told you if her condition worsened, you should take her to the emergency room or call me. Did you confront him with that?
No.
But you did tell him that when you saw him on December 2nd. You told him if her condition deteriorated, he should call the emergency room and take her to the hospital.
Did.
And you are aware now from other sources that in fact her condition clearly deteriorated quite substantially, didn't it?
Did.
On the morning of December 3rd, 1998, would it surprise you to know that Mark Jensen told a variety of people that Julie Jensen couldn't speak,
Didn't know that.
that she was too weak to get out of bed,
Didn't know that either.
that she had to be propped up in bed so her children could kiss her goodbye when they went to school? He didn't tell you that.
Oh,
But the children
Jesus,
begged him
come
to take
on.
mommy to the doctor or call an ambulance. He didn't tell you that?
No.
He didn't tell you that if Mark Jensen had told you, if he called you on
Lose
the morning
the
of December 3rd,
emotion.
1998 and said, my wife can't get out of bed, she's comatose,
not
she's
doing you
non-responsive,
any good.
she's too weak to get out of bed, you would have told him to call the ambulance or rush her to the emergency room, wouldn't you have?
Definitely.
But Mark Jensen didn't call you on the morning of December 3rd, 1998, did he? No. He didn't call the emergency
Hey,
room. did he?
Lenny, good to see you.
In 1998, we had an effective
Good to
911
see
system
you.
in Kenosha County, didn't we?
Right.
If you call 911, they'll dispatch an ambulance, correct?
Right.
In fact, on the afternoon of December 3rd, 1998, when Mark
Welcome,
Jensen
welcome,
reported
welcome.
Julie's death, the emergency room, the paramedic arrived within 2 minutes of receiving the phone call. Were you aware of that?
No.
So certainly paramedic services are very much available, and they were available on December 3rd of 1998.
Yes.
And Mark Jensen, on December 3rd, 1998, after listening to his wife gasping for breath, struggling to breathe, waking up, finding her semi-comatose, and unable to get out of bed, and unable to walk, he did not one damn thing.
Which I
Isn't
would
that
object-
true?
I would object this to
We
argument.
will sustain that.
It is.
Well, on the morning of December 3rd, 1998, he didn't call you.
No.
He didn't call 911.
I don't know.
He didn't take her to the hospital.
Judge, this is all asked and answered.
Well, he can ask the questions one by one. I sustained his objection.
I didn't hear anything from the second until I saw the obit in the paper. Didn't hear anything. No
And-
phone calls, nothing.
When you saw the obit in the paper, you were shocked and deeply, deeply sad. weren't you?
Yes,
You knew Julie
Objection.
Jensen.
I did.
What a terrible loss for her family, correct? At
Objection.
least for her children, correct?
Definitely.
You were unaware that in October of 1998, Mark Jensen was planning to go on a cruise with his girlfriend in October of 1999. He didn't tell you that, did he?
No.
And assuming that is true, and the jury's heard evidence that that is the case, he was going on a cruise in October of 1999 with Kelly Labonte. You don't imagine he was planning on bringing his wife Julie with him, do you? So sometime between October of 1998, when he was proposing this cruise to his girlfriend Kelly Labonte, and October of 1999, when he was planning to go on this cruise with Kelly Labonte, he had to do something about Julie Jensen, didn't he?
Judge, objection, argument.
Sustained.
Objection. Call to strike. Strike the thing. Jeez.
So you never prescribed Librium for Julie Jensen, did you?
I prescribed that for Mark.
Mark had the prescription for Librium. Would it surprise you to know that at the time of her death, Julie had Librium in her system?
Yes,
It wouldn't surprise you to know that she had paroxetine in her system.
I gave that to her.
It wouldn't surprise you to know that she had paroxetine in her system.
And Ambien.
And Ambien. She had Ambien in her system.
Right.
But you would really surprise you to know that she had antifreeze in her system.
Objection, Judge, argumentative.
Overruled. Go ahead.
That was a surprise.
Thank you, Dr. Borman. I don't have any further questions.
Do you have a Lila redirect?
I have
How much?
I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 minutes,
Let's
Judge.
take a short break, folks.
Ah. God. Oh, the incredulation from the prosecution. He is so incredulous. Such an
On
angry little
cross-examination
man.
about
So here we go. All right for jury.
Can you tell whose medical record that is?
So yeah, June 8th, 98, phone call by Julie regarding Mark. Mark had been using her Cataflam, which is an anti-inflammatory for headaches. And current problem with nipples itching and swollen when I'm taking the Cataflam. Duration for 12 to 24 hours could be med-related, and I said yes. And so our recommendations, try Tylenol, or I gave a prescription for ANSAID, which is a different, ANSAID, which is a different kind of anti-inflammatory.
So in June of 1998, this is a note regarding a call that you had with Julie Jensen.
Julie called and talked to one of my staff members, generated the note, and then I looked at it and responded.
And that was about Mark using her medication.
Yes,
I'm going to refer you to the top of that page. Is there another call from Julie Jensen about Mark Jensen?
yes.
And what's the date of that call?
That one is kind of cut off, but it looks like March 2nd of 98.
And what is the nature of that call?
The nature of that call. Julie called regarding Mark. He put washable marker on his face. It didn't wash it off with soap and water. Used Castrol Super Clean. Caustic agent that caused a chemical burn. Painful. Looks like sunburn. Not blister or weepy. What should we do? And then kept him awake most of the night. So I did call back and talk with Julie and suggested cool moist compresses and gave him a prescription for a mild steroid cream to put on the burn.
Dr. Berman, was it unusual in 1990 or 1991 to talk to one spouse about another spouse?
Every family is different, but that's a fairly common deal. Especially when the wife is at home and the husband is working. Oftentimes that would happen.
Any objection from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Right, proceed.
Dr. Berman, one of the other things that you were asked on cross was about David Jensen and his tics.
Correct.
And you were asked if there was somebody who smoked inside the house, if that could contribute to a cough.
Yes.
And you knew Mark to be an avid smoker. Is that what you testified to?
Well, I didn't know how much he was smoking. I knew he smoked. And then I put a note in there about cigars too. So, but yeah,
And you continued to treat Mark after December of 1998,
for a while, yes.
and he continued to smoke.
As far as I know, yeah,
And I think you testified previously that in the spring of 1999, David Ticks had gone away.
yes.
You were also asked on cross-examination about referring David to a specialist. I think it was November 25th of 1998.
Right.
And do you remember what specialist that was that you were going to refer him to in November of 1998?
Yeah, well, first the ear, nose, and throat, and then the allergist. Then there was a neurologist, a pediatric neurologist that I use quite
As
often,
you
but he was
should
out of their
be.
network. And so then we talked to the people at Children's, a resident and a physician about making a referral up there.
November 25th of 1998, was that the first time you ever referred David Jensen to a specialist?
Don't remember.
Do you remember if you had referred him to a specialist, to the allergist and the ear, nose, and throat prior to that date?
I thought I did, but I'd have to see the record.
And he'd actually gone to those specialists, correct?
I don't know.
I'm going to, if I give you a copy of your prior testimony, would that refresh your recollection?
Sure.
What page comes up? Page 9?
Lines 8 through the next page line. Let me know when you're finished, Doctor.
Okay. So I don't remember seeing the reports, but apparently he did see a couple of specialists locally.
Prior to that November 25th,
Yes.
1998 referral to the other doctor.
Yes.
You'd actually been treating David Jensen through 1997 and 1998 for these tics.
Correct.
And I think one of your notes from Julie Jensen at her interval appointment in 1998, September 21st, 1998, one of the first things you talked about, I think you told this jury, was David's tics.
Correct.
This was an ongoing conversation with the Jensen family.
With Julie, yep.
Was she the one that brought David to those appointments?
Yes.
And was she the one that talked to you about how you could help him with his tics?
Yeah.
And was she brainstorming with you ways to address the coughing and the tics?
Objection, counsel's leading the witness. Just rephrase it.
Was Julie Jensen talking to you about options as it related to treating David Jensen?
She was very concerned and wanted to do something to get him better.
And that was that throughout 1997 and 1998?
I think so.
Was that from, or do you think so from the refreshing your recollection from the notes?
Yeah, my testimony.
The other thing you talked about on cross was that Julie Jensen didn't tell you about these phone calls and
Yes.
pornographic images.
Not at all.
I do.
You did talk to her, though, on December 1st about domestic violence.
Right.
And you discussed with her whether she was the victim of domestic violence.
Right. I didn't go through every scenario of every kind of domestic violence, but she didn't say anything about any threats to her life, any poisoning, any intimidation, anything like that.
And I think you were asked on cross about whether Mr. Jensen advised you on December 2nd whether he was having an affair.
Didn't talk about that. No,
And do you have any knowledge about when the affair started or when the affair ended?
not at all.
Do you know if the affair ended prior to December 2nd, 1998?
Don't know that.
On December 1st, 1998, who was in the office when you were talking to Julie Jensen?
In the room, just Julie and I. That was it. And my staff was there to check her in, but and they all noticed that she was upset too and concerned. But the interaction was just between the two of us in an exam room.
And was it based on that interaction between just you and Julie that you made the diagnosis of depression?
Yes.
And was it based upon that diagnosis that you provided her the medication?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Borman. I have nothing further.
You have any recross, Mr. Chairman?
No recross, Your Honor.
We need to make sure.
Probably a good idea.
We have nothing there? Okay, you're free to go. Thank you.
All right. So that's the
We
end
have all the
of
exhibits we used
that
on the
one
table,
with
right?
him.
I believe so.
All right,
I'm going to add it to Exhibit 104. The entire.
let's do that.
Okay, hold on. Let me get the. Perfect. And Clerk, is it okay if I add this after we play it? It's just downloading slow onto the drive.
You want to play the video first?
And then add it to the drive? Okay. Answer. Dawn. Sworn. Ms. Cooper being duly sworn. Question. Could you please state your name and spell your name for the court? Answer. Dawn. D-A-U-N. Cooper. C-O-O-P-E-R. Question. Ms. Cooper, what do you do for work? Answer. I work for a stock brokerage firm. Question. Who do you work for? Answer. Stifel Nicholas. Question. And where is that? Answer. In St. Louis, Missouri. Question. Do you live in St. Louis? Answer. I live across the river in Illinois. Question. Did you just fly up here today for this proceeding? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. How long have you worked for Stifel Nicholas? Answer. I had worked there previously for 11 and a half years, and I've been back there for about a year and a half now. Question. What are your job duties? Answer. I'm a sales assistant to a broker. Question. And what does that entail, being a sales assistant to a broker? Answer. Kind of like being a wife. You do everything. Work with the clients, answer questions, make sure things get done, if funds need to be wired, that kind of thing. Checks issued, whatever. Question, do you have a broker's license to be a sales assistant? Answer, it's not required, but I do. Question, you do have a broker's license? Answer, yes, I am registered. Question, what kind of license do you have? Answer, Series 7 and 64. I'm sorry, 63. Question, what does a Series 7 license allow you to do? Answer, I could be a stockbroker, buy, sell, contact clients, research, suggest stocks, that kind of thing. Question, so having a Series 7 license in itself would allow you to be the broker rather than the assistant? Answer, if I wanted to, yes, sir. Question, you've chosen to do the assistant job rather than being a broker. Answer, that's correct. Question, were you working at Stifel Nicholas in 1998? Answer, yes, I was. Question, how long had you been there at that time? Answer, about 10 years. I went to work there in November of '88. Question, what was your job position at that time in 1998? Answer, at that time, I was a registered sales assistant also. But in addition to my duties, I assisted with the...
Don't need to know.
Question, what was...
Don't care.
Answering questions for the brokers that had come in. If it was a new branch, setting up the cashiering office, whatever needed to be done, basically.
Okay.
There was an office that opened in Racine that year as well. Answer, Question, you have to say yes for the court reporter. Answer, oh, yes. Question, and did you help in opening that office? Answer, no, I was not part of that one. Question, is there a conference that's held annually for Stifel Nicholas called the Blueprint Conference? Answer, yes, sir. Question, do you recall when that was held in 1998? Answer, it was in November sometime. I don't remember when. I just know it was in November. Question, prior to November 1998, did you know, or prior to the Blueprint Conference, did you know a person named Ed Klug? Answer, yes. Question, how did you know Mr. Klug? Answer, because I was involved in opening and helping with the Appleton branch when they came over to Stifel. Question, was Mr. Klug a manager of that branch? Answer, he was a co-manager. They actually have 2 managers there. Question, how many times had you met Mr. Klug prior to that Blueprint Conference? Answer, as I recall, I think I was there twice. Question, were you there the weekend that the office opened? Answer, no, I went afterwards to help out. Question, did you go by yourself or did you go as part of a team? Answer, I was there I think both times. Yeah, I was by myself. Question, so you came up from St. Louis on 2 occasions in October of 1998 to work on the transition of that office? Answer, yeah, it was either September or October, right around in there. The court, I beg your pardon, I didn't hear you, ma'am. The witness, it was either September or October, I don't remember exactly. Question, but you were not there for the weekend when they first opened? Answer, no, I was not. Question, you were aware that people from the transition team came up for like an opening weekend or to make the initial transition? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and were those the only times that you had met Ed Klug prior to the Blueprint Conference? Answer, as far as I can remember, I don't think he was in St. Louis for anything else, so I don't think I had seen him any other time than up there in the branch. Question, okay, and prior to this Blueprint Conference in November 1998, had you ever met Mark Jensen, the man here to my left? Answer, I don't think I had actually met Mark prior to that, but I'm not positive. But the best I can recall, I actually physically met him that weekend. Question, so you did meet Mr. Jensen at the Blueprint Conference? Answer, yes. Question, did you also see Mr. Klug at the Blueprint Conference? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and is there a night at this Blueprint Conference where there's a dinner for everybody from Stifel Nicholas? Answer, it's mostly for the brokers, but they do invite various people in management and so forth, and some of the departments to come. It kind of depends on what's going on at the time. Question, how many people attend this dinner? Answer, several hundred. It's all the brokers that come in from all of the branches that Stifel has. Question, do you know what night of the conference this usually would take place? Answer, I think that year it was a Friday night as I recall. Question, did you attend that Friday night dinner? Answer, I did not go to the dinner, no. Question, and where did this take place? Where was the dinner? Answer, I think the dinner was at the same facility where they were staying, but I'm not positive because I didn't go to it, which is at a Marriott Hotel in St. Louis. Question, was that where the meetings were and where the brokers were generally staying at this Marriott Hotel? Answer, that's my understanding. I can't remember. Yeah, we were in our old office back then, so I don't think they held anything at the office as best I can remember. I think everything was there in the conference rooms. But like I said, I didn't attend them, so I can't say for sure. Question, okay, did you have an occasion to go to the Marriott Hotel after dinner was held that night? Answer, yes, I did. Question, and can you tell me when you arrived at the Marriott in St. Louis? Answer, I don't remember exactly. My best guess would be somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock, because after the dinner, they were all going, a bunch of them anyway, were going to the bar that's located there in the hotel. Question, there's a bar in the lobby of the Marriott? Answer, correct, it's like a club. Question, did you go down there to meet these fellow Stifel Nicholas employees? Answer, correct. Question, and your best guess is that you arrived between 9 and 10? Answer, best I remember because I didn't go to the dinner. Question, what did you do over the next several hours after you arrived? Answer, we were in the bar and talked. I mean, I knew a lot of the people that were there. Some people I worked with, management, some of the transition team was there. Several of the brokers I had worked with in transitions and several branches were there. It was kind of just a mingle, or, everybody was just doing their own thing. Okay, how many people were in the bar? Do you have any idea? Answer. Oh, geez, several hundred? I would say if I had to guess 200 or 300. I really don't know.
Wow.
Question. It was crowded? Answer. At the beginning it was. Question. And you were consuming alcohol while you were there? Answer. Yes. Yes, sir. Question. Was Ed Klug there at the bar? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Was Mr. Jensen there at the bar? Answer. Yes. Question. Do you know a woman named Kelly who's named Kelly Levante? Answer. Yes, I do. Question. Do you know if she was there? Answer. She was. Question. Do you recall if she was with her husband? Answer. I don't remember. Question. And how late did you stay at the Marriott bar that night? Answer. I'm sorry? Question. How late did you stay at the Marriott bar that night? Answer. Until they closed, which would have been 2 o'clock.
Wow.
Question. So you were there until 2 o'clock. Who else was still there that you recall at the end of the night? Or I guess initially, let me ask you, how many people generally were still around? Answer. Not a lot. A lot of people had left. They were going home, I think, the next day. I really don't know. I mean, if I had to take a guess, I'd say between maybe 25 and 50. I don't know. You know, when you're kind of with people, you're talking, you don't notice a lot of times. But it was late, so, that would be my guess. Question. Okay. And was Mr. Jensen still there? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Was Mr. Klug still there? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. What did you do after the bar closed? Answer. We left and went out into the lobby or seating area there at the hotel. Question. Who did? I think you said we. Who is we? Answer. I know that Mark Jensen was there. Ed Klug was there. I'm not positive. I think Ron Ruck may have been there. Question. Who is Ron Ruck? Answer. As far as the people I was talking with anyway. Question. Okay. There may have been other people in the lobby. Answer. Yes. Question. But you were with Mark Jensen, Ed Klug, and perhaps Ron Ruck. Answer. I think so. And there may have been one other person, but I honestly don't remember and I can't say positively. Question. And Mr. Ruck was the co-branch manager of that Appleton office? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Had you met him when you were in Appleton, though? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. What did you then do in the lobby at the Marriott Hotel? Answer. Honestly, I had several drinks and they were concerned about me driving and had taken my keys. And so we sat down for a while so that I could basically sober up where I was more able to drive. So we sat and talked. Question.
So you're still going to drive drunk, just sober.
Answer. Mark Jensen and Ed Klug, I think. I think Ron Ruck was there for a little while. Question. How long did Mr. Ruck stay? Answer. I don't know positively. Like I said, I believe he was still there. But if he was, it wasn't very long. Question. Oh. Answer. Best I can recall. Question. Is it your recollection that Mr. Ruck was there initially in the lobby, but he left earlier than the rest of the people? Answer. I believe so. Question. And I'm sorry, who took your keys? Answer. Initially, Kelly Labonte had taken them from me. Question. Earlier in the night? Answer. Yes. Question. Was she there at 2 a.m.? Answer. No, I believe she'd already left. Question. Who had your keys then as you talked in the lobby? Answer. She had given them to Mark Jensen. Question. So ultimately it's the three of you talking there. Answer. Like I said, best I remember it was eventually just the three of us. Question. How long did you talk in the lobby of the Marriott? Answer. It's been over 9 years. I would say it had to have been at least an hour is my best guess. Question. And can you tell me the nature of the conversation you were having with Mr. Klug and Mr. Jensen was? Answer. As I recall, we discussed some business stuff. We discussed the firm. They were new to Stifel, so how they were liking it, that kind of thing. We also discussed some personal things. At that time, I was going through a divorce, and I was upset that evening, and we talked about that. But I really don't recall anything other than that. Question. You were talking about your divorce? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Were you talking about Mr. Jensen's or Mr. Klug's marriages? Answer. Not specifically. It was more about what I was going through. And they were, very supportive, I guess is the word for it. The only thing I recall is, if I had said something about, and I cannot tell you the specifics, I just recall it was the kind of thing where, like I said, he's been doing this, and they'd say, yeah, I understand, I've been through this and that with my spouse kind of thing. But I don't recall anything specific. It was just one of those types of conversations. Question. Were both Mr. Jensen and Mr. Klug there throughout the time you were there? Did either of them leave at any point? Answer. Mr. Klug left at one point to talk to his wife. I couldn't tell you what time it was. I just remember him getting up and leaving to go speak to his wife. And I don't even know where he went. I don't remember. I just remember him leaving as to go talk to his wife. Question. Did he return at some point? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. Did you ultimately drive home that night or that evening, Mrs. Cooper? Answer. Yes, sir, I did. Question. What time would it have been when you left? Answer. My best guess again is somewhere between 3 and 3:30. Like I said, I would think we were there at least an hour, or that I was there at least an hour. Question. At any time that you were present in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel in November of 1998, did Mark Jensen say anything about harming his wife? Answer. No, sir, I did not hear anything like that. Question. At any time while you were present at the Marriott Hotel in November of 1998, did Mark Jensen say anything about using the computer to look up ways to harm his wife? Answer. No, sir. Question. If Mr. Jensen had talked about harming his wife, is that something you would have remembered? Answer. Absolutely. Question. Is there any particular reason that you would remember that kind of thing? Answer. Well, other than the obvious, Kelly Labonte and I were very good friends, and, she was friends with Mark at the time, and I would have been concerned for her if I had heard. But I mean, even if it weren't for that, I would have said something anyway. Question. That is, a comment about harming someone's wife would have been so unusual and provocative that you believe you would have acted on it? Answer, yes, sir. Question. If you had heard that? Answer, yes, sir. And in addition, because you were friends with Ms. Labonte, you believe you would have taken special note that someone close to her was making this kind of comment? Answer, yes, sir. Question. Were you aware at the time whether they were having an affair? Answer, no, I did not know. Question. Were you aware that they talked frequently? Answer, yes, I knew they were friends. Question. You indicated that you were friends with Kelly Labonte? Answer, yes, sir. Question. How long had you been friends with her? Answer, a while. She worked in the same office where I worked. We had other friends we ran around with. And then she and I did things also, outside of work. As I recall, I don't think Kelly had been at the firm that long, so we kind of became friends not long after she came there. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly when we became friends, but for a while. I would say at that point, probably since the summer at least. I just don't remember the time frame. Question. And are you certain that at no time did Mark Jensen ever say anything about harming his wife? Answer. No, sir, I did not hear anything like that. Question. And are you certain about that? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. At some later point, did you have any conversation with Mr. Klug about Mr. Jensen? Not later that. Well, let me finish up that night, Ms. Cooper. Answer. Okay. Question. When you left that night, can you tell me how that came about or what happened when you left? Answer. I was finally to a point where we all felt safe to drive. And Mark gave me my keys, asked me if I was sure I was able to drive, and I said yes. And they walked me to the door of the hotel, and I left and went home. Question. Mr. Klug and Mr. Jensen had walked you to the door of the hotel? Answer. I believe Mr. Klug, yes. Question. Did Mr. Jensen? Answer. Yes, they were both there as best I can recall. Question. Was there any discussion about you staying at the hotel rather than driving home? Answer. Yes. And Mark Jensen was concerned about me driving, and he offered to get me a room there at the hotel to stay because he was concerned about me driving home, but I declined. Question. You decided that you were okay to drive? Answer. Yes, sir. Question. After that night, did you ever have a conversation with Mr. Klug about Mr. Jensen? Answer. About him specifically? Not that I recall until the day that they actually charged him. Question. Okay. Well, then tell me, did you have a conversation with Mr. Jensen with Mr. Klug after Mr. Jensen was charged in this case? Answer. We did the day that he was charged. Yes. Question. And tell me what took place in that conversation. Answer. I was no longer working at Stifel, and I was working out of a branch. I worked for another brokerage firm at that time and was working out of Rockford, Illinois for a few weeks. And got a phone call from Mr. Klug. He asked me if I had talked to Kelly lately, and I said no. Did it? And I don't remember how long it had been. And I said, why? And he said, have you heard the news? And I said, no, what are you talking about? And he said that they had charged Mr. Jensen. And we talked for a minute or two, and I told him I was going to go, that I wanted to call Kelly and check on her. So it was a very brief conversation. Question. Did Mr. Klug say anything to you about any claimed conversation in St. Louis in November 1998? Answer. No, sir. It was a very brief conversation. Question. At any time, did he ever talk to you about any conversation you had that night in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel? Answer. No, sir. After this line. Question. And I take it, Ms. Cooper, at no time when you had this conversation in Rockford, when you were in Rockford, and this was by telephone, right? And I believe this is where the video picks up.
That was more than 5 minutes.
Sorry, I was trying to be clear and concise.
I understand.
In my talking.
All right, let's play a video.
Time when you had this conversation in Rockford, when you were in Rockford, and this was by telephone, right?
Correct.
Did Mr. Klug say anything about a conversation with Mark and talked about harming his wife?
Yes, sir.
And you didn't say anything to him that Mark had ever had any such conversation, correct?
Yes, sir.
You had never heard such conversation, so you would not have been able to mention it.
That's correct.
How is it that Mr. Klug knew how to find you in Rockford? This would have been March 2002?
Whatever, right? I don't remember the exact year.
If I told you that there was evidence in this case that Mr. Jensen was charged in March 2002, then you would know that it was at that time?
Right.
And were you in Rockford in that period of time?
Yes, sir.
How did Mr. Klug know to find you there since you were no longer working for Stifel Nicholas and were not working out of Rockford?
He had my cell phone number, and we would talk, I don't know, periodically, which is not unusual with brokers you work with. Sometimes if they have a question and can't find an answer, they'll give you a call.
And at any time during these periodic conversations, did he ever say anything about having an unusual conversation with Mr. Jensen?
No, sir.
Did he ever say anything about Mark talking about harming his wife?
No, sir.
When's the next time? At some point, you were contacted about this matter. Is that right? In 2007?
About the comment, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Tell me when you were contacted in 2007 about this matter.
It would have been July of 2007.
And do you recall when in July?
It was the week of the 25th, and I know that because it was my boyfriend's birthday, and I was actually on vacation when I was contacted because I was planning his birthday party.
And what day of the week was it?
It was Friday.
So Friday at the end of the week of July 20, that included July 25th.
Correct. Which I think the 25th was a Wednesday, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so you probably July 27th.
Yes, sir.
And what occurred on that day?
I was running errands and got a phone call from a girl that I work with. Is that she had been contacted at the office by someone who was trying to get in touch with me, and I asked her what it was regarding. She didn't know, and I said, "Well, I'll talk to him Monday," because I didn't realize it was anything urgent. And so she called me back on my cell. I guess I don't remember, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour later, and they had called again, and it said it was imperative that they talk to me. So I got the phone number from her and called.
Okay, and who was it that you called?
It was I guess it's the district attorney in Milwaukee.
Kenosha.
I guess, I'm sorry, I don't know wherever he's located. Sorry.
Okay. But you had a number for a district attorney's office.
She had a female's name, and I don't recall the name and a phone number.
Okay. And what happened when you called that number?
And when I called, I was put on, I guess, like a speakerphone, and it was the lady who had called at my office and the district attorney.
And then what was said?
They asked me, had I been present, but they didn't give information that I was present. I think he said something about me when we were out for drinks, and there was a comment made that I recalled the conversation, and I told him I did not.
And was there further conversation?
He asked me, I said, well, actually, let me back up. I asked him at that point to please be a little bit more specific, because it wasn't like I was with some of these people just one time for drinks, you know. And I'm trying to think, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember how the conversation went. I asked him to be more specific. He said it was over drinks, and that Ed Klug was present and Mark Jensen was present. And I, once again, said I need to be a little more specific because I had been with him before. And he said that a comment had been made. Eventually, it came down to the comment had been made about Mark harming his wife, I think is how he put it. And did I recall that? And I said, no, I didn't.
And this question is in the context of asking you that they had understood that you were present when this comment was made.
Right.
And what happened after you told them that you were not present for any such conversation?
I was just told that this was a murder investigation. Was I sure? And I said, yes, that I would recall something like that, and that I didn't recall it. And that was the end of the conversation, as I remember.
And that remains the case today, that you remember no such conversation?
Yes, sir.
And you're confident that you would remember such conversation if it had ever taken place in the presence of Ed Klug and Mark Jensen?
Yes, sir.
And at no time did Mark Jensen ever talk to you about harming or killing his wife, or looking up things on the computer about killing his wife?
No, sir.
When was the last time you spoke with Kelly?
I'm not positive exactly. We lost touch, basically. I know I talked to her when Mark Jensen was charged. I actually met her partway between, and I don't know where it was, somewhere between Rockford and Racine. We had dinner and talked for a while. I think I talked to her a couple more times maybe after that. And she and I would email occasionally. And it had been a while since I'd had any contact with her. And I know that later on, I tried to send her an email that came back undeliverable, and she wasn't working there anymore. If I had to pick a guess, I would say probably sometime maybe fall of 2002, possibly 2003. I just don't remember. We just lost touch.
Okay. You think it's been around five years or so since you've had any contact with her?
That would be my best guess.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. The prosecutor may have some questions for you.
So Ms.
Wow.
What time was it that you think you left the hotel that night?
My best guess, like I said, is somewhere between 3 and 3:30.
No, at that time, but could have been before 3 o'clock?
I can't say positively, but I don't think it was.
When was the first time anybody asked you about what time you left that hotel in November of 1998?
I guess it was in the fall of 07, this past fall, like, I guess September-ish.
So it was 9 years later. Okay. And you'd been drinking that evening?
Yes, sir.
And at some point, your friend Kelly Levante took your keys because you didn't want you driving under those circumstances?
Yes, sir.
And do you know what time it was that Kelly Levante took your keys?
I mean, I can't say positively. I guess would be a little after midnight. It was a while before the bar closed. I mean, it was, let's put it this way, it would have been at least an hour before the bar closed. Because I know I believe she was getting ready to leave.
And I don't know what time the bar closes.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. So,
And she was getting ready to leave, and that was when she took my keys.
so sometime between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, she took your keys?
That would be my best guess. Like I said, it's been over 9 years, so
And it was her impression that you were intoxicated at the time?
enough that she didn't think I should be driving.
And you were in sufficient agreement with her on that point that you gave her your keys?
No.
Oh, you fought about getting it?
Yes, sir.
And you're not the first intoxicated person to do that, right?
No,
I've seen that
I'm
now.
quite certain of that.
So she was looking out for your best interest?
Yes, sir.
And ultimately, you relented money or keep your keys?
Sort of. She took them.
Did you stop drinking alcohol at that point?
I can't say that's true, no.
Oh, so you continued to drink alcohol
I
after?
would say I probably had one more, maybe 2 at the most.
Okay, so 1 or 2 more after you took your keys?
I was to the point I remember I distinctly remember in fact that I was emotional, so I knew I needed to stop.
Emotional about her taking your keys, or emotional about the breakup of your relationship with your husband?
Yes, sir, about my marriage. It was a rough time for me.
And so you had too much to drink, and you were emotional, and you were venting somewhat about your husband, correct?
Yes.
And who were you venting to?
At that time, you mean?
Yes, at the time that you were emotional and venting, who were you venting to?
Oh, probably anybody that would listen.
Anybody listen?
No, I'm kidding. There were a lot of people there I knew, but at that time I recall that Mark was standing there, Mark Jensen, and Kelly was there. There were a couple other people at that time standing there from our company.
And we've all heard that from people that are going through divorce, where they were venting about the problems they had with their spouse. You've heard that before too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've not just been in the delivering, and you've been in the receiving end of those
Yes, I have.
conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And ordinarily, you find people are empathetic when you try to be empathetic with somebody in those circumstances. And in view of the problems you had with your previous relationship, you perhaps got a lot of information to impart to somebody in that situation, right?
I would say, yeah, I try not to, but yes, if they asked.
Sure. And now you may not remember exactly what you were venting about with your friends concerning your ex-husband, but I'll bet as you're sitting here today, you still remember the complaints you had about your husband, right?
Yes, and it wasn't just that. It was also just the difficulty of going through the divorce.
Sure.
I was married 10 years, never thought I would be in that situation, and it was very sad for me. So it wasn't just complaining. It was, that kind of thing too.
And I don't mean to raise up bad memories for you, but we are going to inquire into that from you. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. Even though you don't remember what you were complaining to your friends about specifically, do you remember just sitting here today what you felt was unfair about what was going on in your life at that time in terms of that relationship with your husband?
Yes, sir.
And I know you probably don't mean any ill will for your ex-husband, but
No,
for
no.
purposes of this case, it may be helpful for us to inquire into that. So what were some of your complaints about your ex-husband?
He was very stubborn, difficult to deal with at times, not an open person. So it was hard to talk through things when the other person doesn't want to talk, that kind of thing.
Well, I'll bet there are a lot of women that have that complaint about
I'm
this.
sure there are.
My wife and you could get together, I'm sure, and shares. So probably when you were complaining to your friends or talking to your friends or seeking empathy from your friends that night, probably that was one of the things that you were complaining about, that he was stubborn, not communicative, that sort of thing.
Like to push my buttons.
And when your friends were empathizing with you, did they relate some of the problems they've been having in their relationships too?
Yes, sir.
And
I mean, I can't tell you specifically. I don't recall, but I know it was one of those kind of conversations.
and who were the people participating in that conversation?
Kelly was there, like I said. To be honest, at that point, if you're talking about when my keys were taken away, is that what we're still discussing?
Well, I guess we're talking about the time when you were complaining about your husband, but that included when the keys were taken away, yes.
Okay, because I know
Let's
it-
just go that point forward.
Okay, because I know at that time it was more I was dealing with. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be single. It's not what I intended, you know. And I mean, I specifically remember Kelly telling me, you know what, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna make it. That kind of thing. And you know, several of the others that were standing there, Mark Jensen and them, you know, same thing.
And then later on, you started
Well-
complaining more specifically about your spouse.
Mhm.
And so then did the manner in which they were empathizing with you change? Is they saying you're going to work your way through this? Did they start talking about their spouses?
Yes, sir.
So when you left the evening, that's what the conversation was. It was, I don't want to simplify say spouse bashing, but really you were all sharing kind of war stories about your spouses.
It was part of what we discussed that evening. Yes. I mean, it wasn't the entire conversation. No.
But that's what it turned to by the time you were leaving.
I don't remember what specifically we were talking about at the point when I left. We had been discussing it. Yes.
And then at some point you left.
Yes, sir.
And when you left, where did you leave from? I mean, where were you in the hotel at the time that you left?
The same place we had been sitting. There was like a seating area where they have, you know, a couple of chairs and a love seat kind of thing.
And what had you been drinking as you were sitting there before you left?
Water.
And was the bar closed or open at that
No,
point?
it was closed.
And the bar closed at 2 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
And so you left sometime after the bar closed?
Yes, sir.
And your recollection at this point, your best recollection is that it could have been about an hour after the bar closed.
Yes, sir.
That could have been a little less, a little more.
Yes, sir.
And when you left, who was still sitting there talking to each other?
When I left, I know that Mark Jensen was there and Ed Clay was there, and they walked me to a hotel door, which was maybe from here to that door. If I had to guess.
And then you left?
Yes, sir.
And you don't know what happened the rest of that evening?
No, sir.
Now let's talk about you and Kelly Jensen, if we can. At that time it was Kelly Labonte, right?
Yes,
Well, actually, at that time in November of 1998, it was Kelly Green, correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
And did you attend Kelly's wedding?
No, they did not get married in town.
But you knew about Kelly's wedding.
Yes.
And at the time of Kelly's wedding, how long had you known Kelly? How many months or years had you known Kelly if you know?
It wasn't years, I know that, because she hadn't been at the firm that long. And I honestly don't remember the time frame. I would say I'd known her, I just don't know, a few months.
Well, did you two socialize after work on occasion?
Yes, we did.
Did you feel as though you had something in common with Kelly?
Yes, sir.
And so you would get together after work and have a couple of drinks and talk?
Sometimes, I recall one time I actually got together with she and her husband at a Joe's Crab Shack and had dinner with them.
You and your husband, or just her and her husband?
Her, Kelly's husband.
And when you went to the crab shack with Kelly and her husband, was your husband along too or not?
No.
By this time, had your relationship with your husband started to go south, or was it just that your husband was always engaged that evening?
No, I think we were separated already, which would have been the first week of October, I believe.
When you and Kelly would get together and after work, would you discuss your relationships with each other?
Sure.
So you would discuss how your relationship was going south?
Yes, sir.
When you first met Kelly, do you know was she married at that time?
She was not.
So when you first met Kelly, she was still going by Kelly Labonte?
Correct.
And she had not yet married Mark Freeman?
Correct.
And at some point during the course of your friendship with Kelly Labonte, she told you about her engagement to Mark Freeman?
Yes, I knew she was seeing somebody and I knew she was engaged.
Okay, when you say you knew she was seeing somebody and you knew she was engaged, did you know those to be two different people? Or?
No.
Okay.
When I met her, she was seeing someone and I knew that she had got engaged.
Okay. Now, at some point, did she tell you about her and Mark Jensen?
As far as that she knew him, met him, or what was
As far as she was having an affair with him?
No, she did not. I did not know that until I didn't know there was anything. Let me rephrase that. I did not know specifically that they were having a romantic involvement until, if I had to take a guess, I would say that would have been 98. So I would say around January, maybe February of 99, whatever that. Yeah.
So sometime after Julie Jensen's death is when you found out that they were having an affair?
Yes, sir.
Did you find out? How did you find out about the affair?
Well, Judge,
Well-
this is calling for hearsay.
Well,
Well, actually, well, yeah, well, it will. I guarantee it. Even though you're not specifically asking for the hearsay, it'll come in, and so no.
I'm not going to ask her how she found out about this affair.
Because in itself, the question suggests the existence of hearsay, so the answer is no.
Well, when you found out about it, was it from one of the direct participants in the affair, or was it from somebody else?
Just a minute. Sustained.
Well, did
Look at that nasty look on his face. It
Kelly
hasn't
Freeman's relationship
changed.
with Mark Jensen?
I knew they were friends. I knew that she had gone there. and that's how
Hasn't
she met him,
changed in
and they were
all
friends.
these years.
The evening
Still gets beat
that
red.
this conversation occurred, where you were complaining about your spouse and Kelly took your keys, that was that a Friday night in November of 1998?
Yes, I believe it was.
And you recall Kelly being there?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall whether or not her husband was there, Mark Freeman?
I don't remember exactly.
Good prosecutor, but
That evening that you were drinking, did you notice whether or not Mark Jensen or Kelly Freeman or Ed Klug, did you notice what they were drinking or not?
Everybody was. I mean, I shouldn't say everybody. Yes, they were.
But they were all staying at the hotel, right?
Mark Jensen was and Ed Clay was.
I don't have further questions. Thank you.
You're asking questions again about timing. As I understood it, your best recollection is 3 to 3:30.
Yes, sir.
In terms of conversation you had with Mr. Klug, was there any discussion about any relationship you had with the secretary?
No, sir.
Was there any, do you recall any conversation about his wife being jealous?
I don't recall.
The best part of the conversation you remember is what you were talking about, and then they were registering sort of general general grievances about their marriage.
Yes, sir.
Do you think you were
Not abnormal.
intoxicated to such a degree that you wouldn't remember if there had been some statement about killing one's wife?
No, sir.
I'm not sure if we did double negative on that, but
No, I was not so intoxicated that I think that I would not remember. I would remember if I had heard it, put it that way.
you don't have any blackout period from that time.
No, sir.
If there had been some conversation about harming one's wife, is that something that you would remember?
Yes, sir.
And whatever you had to drink would not interfere with that memory?
No, sir.
In this conversation you had with the district attorney's office, do I understand correctly that the first question you were asked said, we understand you were present during a conversation about harming one's wife?
No, that's not how the first question was phrased.
All right. Let me see if I can clarify this.
Okay.
Initially, you were asked whether you were present during some conversation,
Yes.
and there was no specification regarding the type of conversation.
No, sir. Not the first question.
Okay. And then was there some clarification from the district attorney's office about what the conversation was about?
After a couple of other questions, when I asked to be more specific, because it came out of left field, and I had no idea what they were talking about at that time.
And then when they asked a specific question, did they say something along the line that we understand you were present during a conversation in which Mr. Jensen discussed harming his wife?
I honestly don't recall whether the phrasing was, we understand, we were given information, we were told, I don't remember, but it was that their understanding was that, that was the gist of it, was that I was present at that, when this conversation took place.
Okay. So you don't remember if it's, we understand, we were given information, we were told, but it's along those lines?
Yes, sir.
And then you told them that you had not been present for such a
I
conversation?
said I never heard that comment.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. And I take, Ms. Cooper, at no time.
Okay, are we moving some exhibits in?
Yes, Judge, that is part of, I'll make that part of Exhibit 104.
What do we have next then?
Judge, we don't have another witness currently available, and I can explain to the court the reason for it.
You guys want to go home? That was 8:30, folks. Don't talk about the case.
Well, there we go. Let's see what the explanation is why they don't have a witness.
Just hold on.
Are you going to have your experts here?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to have your experts here?
Yes, so Stacey Hale,
Okay.
Detective Ratsberg, Monica Springhetti, Joanne Wise-Colby couldn't be here today. She had surgery, so we're going to have to edit and play a video.
Which number would that be?
Joanne Wise-Colby.
Not off the top of my head. She's at the bottom of the list, though, because it's under Wise, I believe.
Oh, I see 32.
And then we have another video for an unavailable witness,
When are you going to have Dr. Sarah West?
Monday.
Monday.
She was originally scheduled for February 1st and did move up her flight to Monday.
So then what do we have scheduled for Friday?
We have Dr. Lindsay Thomas, Laura Coster, and Ed Ruck.
Ron Rock.
Ron Ruck, not Ed Klug, Ron Ruck.
After we get done with Dr. West, any further witnesses after that?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay.
I think Monday, Judge, we have 3 witnesses total, and those are the people that couldn't rearrange flights.
All right.
It's going to be Sarah West, Pam Dreyer, and David Jensen.
And it's never too early to start thinking about jury instructions. You can start working on them, and so at least I can start.
Oh,
Okay.
so they may close this thing up by Friday.
I
May
those,
close
but
their case
should maybe
out.
Put a different file number, or it's the same number. Different judge. There we go. I knew I'd get the right answer after a while.
And different dates.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. That looks like it for their evening. Not seeing anything more beyond that. That is it. Well, that's it for that. Man. So, do I think that he will be going back to jail? Yeah, I think he'll be going back to jail. But do I think he did it? I mean, I still think he did it. I just don't see enough proof. Well, let's see what my poll ended up here. Do you think that they have proven he is guilty? 63% of you say no. I do agree with you on that. 18% of you said yes. And 18% of you said, I hate a deviled egg. Just like Memento Mori said. I love deviled eggs. Yum, yum. They got to be done right, though. Can't put too much odd stuff in them or they just don't taste quite right. I've never made deviled eggs. I just enjoy eating deviled eggs. But looks like the Murdaugh trial started today. I was thinking about going for a rundown on that, but I believe that we've got plenty of attorneys that are giving rundowns on that particular case, which is probably going to be more interesting. So what I'll do is I'll probably do some sort of catch up as that comes along. Today being Wednesday, coming up on Thursday, I will not be streaming tomorrow. And so I'll probably do a Friday stream. Possibly I'll do a double up on it or pick up Saturday and show it on Friday. Yeah. Andrew, Nick, Kurt, and Peter. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people doing it. And it's a really interesting one, and it sort of hits and Emily, yes, and Emily. I'll probably catch up with it like in the wee hours of the morning when I get up and am drinking my coffee. I'll probably drop into their stream and sort of just get caught up with what's going on with that particular one. But sometimes early on, it doesn't do really well. The case moves pretty slow, same as this one did. The first couple of days were just skipping across a whole bunch of stuff. So, if I get a chance, I'll check out some of their streams, and I might just kick back and watch some of those and take a little bit of a break, just to, because I got these. You can't really see them on a screen, but I got Invisalign in my melon, because my bottom teeth are pretty jacked. I'm just trying to get those things straightened out, but they found that my bite wasn't right and blah blah. So I've got these things in for a period of time, and it can get slightly painful. You'll probably see me chewing like this because it's it takes a little bit to get used to. But I couldn't really do the braces because the cuts would hurt the lips in my old face. So yeah, I'm trying to get these jacked up teeth straightened out. But yeah, so that's a lot of information. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll probably finish once I get this whole trial finished out here. I may not do any more trial streams for a little bit, just so I can take a break and let my face heal up, let my face heal up a little bit, so it's not so sore. And Thursday I've got a prior engagement that's nothing to do with any streams or anything like that, but just work related stuff, and it happens every so often that I'll have to do these evening kind of things. So at least once a month currently, my nights will be busy, so I won't be able to stream on that night, but I'll try to pick up where I left off. So I think it's the fourth Thursday or something like that of every month. I'm not available to stream. And if I do, it'll be a very short stream. It'll be nothing to do with any court related stuff. I want to get back into doing some more fun streams and getting to know my chat and having a little bit of fun with some other things, because these can be pretty depressing, seeing someone having to suffer through some sort of jail time. Never fun. But anyhow, I'm going to get a little bit of rest tonight. I've got a busy day tomorrow. I have a lot of prep to do in the morning for this meeting that's going to be going on in the evening. So I've just got to get all this work done, and I don't want to keep you guys from enjoying some of the wonderful YouTubery that goes on. So I want to wish all of you every single one of you to have a wonderful night. If you could, don't care if you pray or not pray or worship, however you do. Put your thoughts and prayers into Rabbit. She lost one of her grandsons, so she's going to be out for a bit. Just that's a lot to deal with, and we all wish the best for her. So just keep her in your thoughts, please. And anyhow, I don't want to leave on such a sad note, but please do keep her in your thoughts. And it's wonderful seeing all of you here tonight. I really appreciate it, and thanks for bearing with me. And I think I can get better at this. It feels a little more natural, just sort of getting into the groove of how it works, the transitions, and trying to be more active with my chat, which I do have a great chat. I have some really good mods here too. Thank you, mods. Thank you, listeners, and enjoy. Peace, y'all. Peace.
Exótica.